Nero Wolfe and the Dead Investor. It was a Wednesday in late October when Bernard Lattimore walked into Nero Wolfe's office and brought with him the smell of expensive fear. I say expensive because everything about the man reeked of money. The custom suit that probably cost more than Fritz's entire monthly grocery budget, the gold cufflinks that caught the afternoon light, the Italian leather briefcase that made a soft, wealthy thud when he set it beside the red leather chair. But underneath the cologne and the confidence, there was sweat, cold sweat, the kind that comes when a man realizes his money might not be able to buy him out of trouble this time. I was at my desk going through the morning mail when he arrived at 3:15. The 5 Dobermans had announced him before Fritz could. A low, harmonious rumble that started with Caesar in the front hall and rippled through the brownstone like a wave. Through the office doorway, I could see their shadows shifting in the corridor. Caesar, the big alpha with the scarred ear, stood nearest the office door, his massive head tilted in that way that suggested he was deciding whether to tolerate this visitor or remove him. Behind him, Mars held the flank position, muscles coiled. Apollo paced near the stairs, restless as always, while Minerva and Diana covered the rear approach with the kind of coordinated precision that would make a military tactician weep with envy. "Easy," I called out. "He's expected, more or less." The dog settled, but didn't relax. They never really relaxed when strangers were in the house. That was the point. Wolfe wouldn't come down from the plant rooms until 4. His schedule was sacred, and I'd stopped trying to interrupt it for anything short of nuclear war, so I'd told Lattimore to show up at 3:30. He was early. That told me something. Nervous men are always early. I stood up and gave him my best professional smile. "Mr. Lattimore, Archie Goodwin. Mr. Wolfe will see you at 4. Can I get you something while you wait? Coffee? Fritz makes it better than anyone in Manhattan." "No, nothing. Thank you." He sat down without waiting for an invitation, which told me something else. He was the kind of man used to sitting wherever he wanted. But his hands were clasped tight on his knees, knuckles white. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe immediately. It's urgent." "Everything's urgent these days," I said pleasantly, sitting back down. "But Mr. Wolfe is with his orchids until 4 o'clock. The last person who tried to interrupt him during plant room hours got a 15-minute lecture on the proper cultivation of Cattleya Włoskiewiczi. Do you know anything about orchids, Mr. Lattimore?" "I know about death threats," he said flatly. That got my attention. I pulled out my notebook, the one with the good paper that doesn't smudge when you write fast. Death threats, plural, 3 in the past week. He reached into his briefcase with shaking hands and pulled out a manila envelope. Letters, typed, no signature, each one more specific than the last. I took the envelope and spread the letters on my desk. 3 sheets of expensive bond paper, the kind you buy at places that gift wrap your purchases. Each one had been typed on what looked like an old manual typewriter, slightly uneven pressure on the keys, the E riding a hair higher than the other letters. The first one was dated October 15th. "You've stolen enough. Stop now or pay the price." The second, October 19th. "The scheme ends, or you do. Last warning." The third, just yesterday. "The walls are closing in, Bernard. Wednesday is your last day to make it right. After that, I make it right for you." "Today's Wednesday," I observed. "I'm aware," he said dryly. There was some spine under that fear after all. "Who knows you're here?" "My wife, my lawyer, my secretary." He hesitated. "And possibly whoever's been following me for the past 3 days." I looked up sharply. "Following you?" "A dark blue sedan. Different drivers, I think, but the same car. It's been parked across from my apartment building, outside my office, even at my club." He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his forehead. "I'm not imagining it, Mr. Goodwin. Someone wants me dead, or at least wants me to think they do, and I need to know who before they make good on it." Caesar's low growl from the hallway made us both look up. The front door had opened. I heard Fritz's polite murmur, and another voice, female, with the kind of finishing school accent that could cut glass at 20 paces. "I don't care if he's with the Queen of England," the woman said. "I need to see Bernard Lattimore, now." I stood up just as a blonde in a black dress and pearls swept past Fritz like he was a doorman instead of the best chef in New York. She stopped in the office doorway and Caesar stepped between her and the room. She didn't even blink. "Call off your dog," she said to me. Then she saw Lattimore. "There you are, you coward. Running to a private detective? What are you going to tell him?" How you've been embezzling from your own fund. How you've stolen $17 million from your investors. Lattimore was on his feet, face flushed. Ellen, for God's sake. Don't you Ellen me. I know what you've done. We all know. And if you think hiring some detective is going to save you. Lady, I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through hers. I'm going to need you to take 3 steps back and identify yourself. Caesar here hasn't had lunch yet, and he's particular about strangers who storm into his house. She glanced at the Doberman, then back at me. For a second I thought she might charge ahead anyway, but she took 2 steps back. Close enough. Ellen Draycott, she said. Lattimore's business partner. Or I was, until I discovered he's been cooking the books and running the fund into the ground. That's a lie, Lattimore said, but there wasn't enough force behind it. I looked from one to the other. Lattimore's death threats were starting to make more sense, but before I could say anything, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for, the whir of the elevator descending from the plant rooms. 4 o'clock. Wolfe was coming down. Both of you sit, I said, and whatever shouting match you want to have, save it. Because you're about to meet someone who hates raised voices almost as much as he hates disruptions to his schedule. The elevator settled with a soft thump. The door opened, and Nero Wolfe, all 1/7 of a ton of him, emerged into his office like a battleship coming to port. He stopped when he saw the 3 of us. His eyes, half closed behind his glasses, took in the scene. Lattimore rigid with fear, Ellen Draycott rigid with fury, me standing between them like a referee at a boxing match, and Caesar holding position at the door. Archie, he said in that deep rumble that could make dictators nervous. I was expecting one guest. You appear to have collected a crowd. It's been an interesting afternoon, I said. Mr. Bernard Lattimore, who I believe you've heard about. And this is Ellen Draycott, his business partner. She has some strong opinions about embezzlement. Wolfe moved to his desk, settled into the custom-made chair that groaned under his weight, and reached for the bronze opener beside the stack of mail. He slit open an envelope with surgical precision, before looking up. Madam, he said to Ellen, are you here as a client? I'm here to tell you not to waste your time. This man is a thief. That's a serious accusation, Wolfe said mildly. He looked at Lattimore. Are you a thief, sir? I'm being framed, Lattimore said. Someone's trying to destroy me, and they're doing a damn good job of it. Wolfe sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested his afternoon had just gotten infinitely more tedious than he'd hoped. Archie, close the door, and send Caesar to his station. If we're going to discuss embezzlement and death threats, I prefer not to have an audience in the hallway. I closed the door and snapped my fingers. Caesar gave Lattimore one more long look, then padded away. Through the office window, I could see Mars take up position in the front garden, Apollo moving to the side alley. The perimeter was secure. Inside, things were just getting started. Wolfe opened his drawer and pulled out a bottle opener, then reached for the first of his afternoon beers. Now then, he said, pouring with the concentration of a chemist, someone explained to me why I should care about any of this. And that, as they say, was when things got interesting. Wolfe took his first sip of beer with the reverence some men reserve for prayer. The foam left a thin line on his upper lip, which he dabbed away with a napkin before setting the glass down precisely in the center of the coaster. Only then did he look at Lattimore. Mr. Lattimore, you telephoned yesterday requesting an appointment. You mentioned a delicate matter requiring discretion. You did not mention embezzlement, business partners, or death threats. I dislike surprises almost as much as I dislike incomplete information. I was trying to be discreet, Lattimore said. I didn't know she'd follow me here. Ellen Draycott laughed, a sound like ice cracking. I didn't follow you, Bernard. I've known about your appointment since yesterday. Your secretary is more loyal to the fund than she is to you. When I heard you were running to a detective, I knew you were getting desperate. Miss Draycott, Wolfe said, not looking at her. You will remain silent, or you will leave. Archie, if she interrupts again, show her out. Ellen's mouth opened, then closed. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed, but she stayed quiet. Score 1 for Wolfe's intimidation factor. Wolfe turned his attention back to Lattimore. You claim to be framed. Framed for what, precisely? Lattimore loosened his tie. The expensive silk was already wrinkled from his nervous hands. I ran a private investment fund, the Lattimore Capital Group. We manage approximately 200 million in assets for 63 clients. High net worth individuals, family trusts, a few small foundations. Our specialty is arbitrage opportunities in commodities futures and currency hedging. Fascinating, Wolfe said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. Continue. 3 weeks ago, one of our auditors noticed irregularities in the fund's holdings, positions that didn't match the client statements, trades that showed profits on paper but actual losses in execution. At first, we thought it was a clerical error. Then we realized it was systematic. Someone has been siphoning money from the fund for at least 18 months, possibly longer. How much? I asked. $17.3 million, Ellen said before Lattimore could answer. 17.3 million. That simply vanished into a series of shell companies and offshore accounts, all of them traced back to Bernard's personal oversight. That's not true, Lattimore said. I didn't create those accounts. I didn't authorize those transfers. Someone with access to my credentials has been systematically looting the fund and making it look like I'm responsible. Wolfe drank more beer. Why you? I'm sorry? Why frame you specifically? If someone wanted to steal from the fund, why not do so cleanly? Why create a trail that leads to you? Lattimore hesitated. Because I'm the face of the fund. I'm the one clients trust. If I go down, the whole operation collapses. The scandal alone would destroy us. Redemptions would flood in. The SEC would freeze our assets. Whoever's doing this wants to gut the company completely. Or, Ellen interjected, you're lying. Maybe you plan to disappear with the money, but the audit caught you before you could run. So now you're here, trying to hire a detective to muddy the waters and buy yourself time. Wolfe set down his glass with a sharp click. Miss Draycott, I warned you once. Archie. I stood up. This way, ma'am. Wait. Ellen held up a hand. I'm sorry, but Mr. Wolfe, you need to understand what's at stake here. I've worked with Bernard for 8 years. I helped build this fund from nothing, and now I'm watching it collapse because of his greed. Our clients are going to lose everything. Retirees, charities, people who trusted us. Trusted you. Lattimore's voice rose. Ellen, you're the one who insisted we move to the new custodian bank. You're the one who hired Philip Renshaw to overhaul our systems. You had just as much access to those accounts as I did. More, probably, since you handle all the operational oversight. Are you accusing me now? Ellen's face flushed. That's rich. That's really rich. Wolfe closed his eyes. For a moment I thought he might be falling asleep, which he sometimes did when bored. But then he spoke, eyes still closed. This is tedious. You both had access. You both had opportunity. You both had motive, his to steal, yours to frame him, or perhaps to cover your own theft. The police are better equipped to sort out financial fraud than I am. I suggest you take your accusations and your death threats to them and stop wasting my time. The police can't help me, Lattimore said desperately. Don't you understand? Whoever's doing this has been meticulous. Every piece of evidence points to me. My digital signatures on the transfers, my passwords used to access the accounts, my personal laptop showing searches for offshore banking regulations. The police will arrest me the moment they start investigating. I'll be indicted within a week. Perhaps you should be, Wolfe said, opening his eyes, if you're guilty. I'm not guilty, damn it. Lattimore was on his feet now, face red. I built that fund with my own hands. I spent 12 years establishing relationships, earning trust, generating real returns for real people. Why would I destroy all of that for $17 million? I'm already worth more than that. My partnership stake alone is worth $30 million if we liquidate properly. Why would I kill the golden goose? It was a good question, actually. I made a note of it. Wolfe looked at him with the expression of a man watching a fly buzz against a window. Mr. Lattimore, I have no interest in investment funds, arbitrage opportunities, or financial irregularities. I find the entire world of high finance to be supremely boring. The language alone is enough to induce somnolence. Hedging, derivatives, custodian banks, SEC filings, it's all noise designed to obscure simple human greed. But, however, Wolfe continued, raising a finger, you mentioned death threats. Show them to me. I handed over the 3 letters. Wolfe read each one slowly, holding them up to the light, examining the paper quality and the typeface. He spent a full 2 minutes on them, which for Wolfe meant they interested him more than he was letting on. "These were delivered how?" he asked. "The first came to my office, in the regular mail," Lattimore said. "The second was slipped under my apartment door. The third was on my car windshield yesterday morning." "Escalation," I said. "Each one more personal, closer to home." Wolfe nodded. "And the content is specific. The scheme ends, or you do. That suggests the writer knows details about the fraud. Make it right implies there's a way to resolve this that doesn't involve your death. Have you received any demands? Any instructions on how to make it right?" "No, nothing." "Curious." Wolfe set the letters down. "These are not the work of a professional. The language is theatrical. The delivery method is risky. Hand-delivering letters leaves opportunities for witnesses, and the deadline is arbitrary. Why Wednesday? Why today? What's significant about today?" Lattimore and Ellen exchanged a glance. She spoke first. "The quarterly audit results are being delivered to our board today, 5 o'clock. If the fraud is officially documented, it becomes a matter of public record within 24 hours. SEC regulations." "Ah." Wolfe leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously. "So the deadline isn't arbitrary. It's the last moment before everything becomes irreversible, before you're exposed beyond any possibility of denial. Which is why I need your help," Lattimore said. "I need to find out who's framing me before that audit goes public. Otherwise my life is over. And based on these letters, it might be over literally, not just figuratively." Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Outside, I could hear Apollo's claws clicking on the brownstone side path. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching dust motes in golden shafts. Somewhere in the house, Fritz was preparing dinner. I could smell onions caramelizing, beef stock simmering. Wednesday meant coq au vin, unless I missed my guess. Finally, Wolfe spoke. "No." Lattimore blinked. "No? No. I am not interested in your case. Your problems are financial and legal, not criminal in the sense that interests me. If someone is embezzling from your fund, hire forensic accountants. If someone threatens your life, hire bodyguards. If someone is framing you, hire a lawyer. But do not hire me. I have no taste for the intricacies of investment fraud, and I have even less taste for clients who may be lying to me." "I'm not lying." "Perhaps not. But Miss Draycott believes you are, which suggests the situation is ambiguous enough to be troublesome. I prefer cases where the facts are clear and the solution is a matter of proper reasoning. Your case is a swamp of financial records and conflicting testimonies. I have no desire to wade into it." Ellen stood up, smoothing her dress. "Well, at least the great Nero Wolfe has some sense. Come on, Bernard. You're not going to get help here. Maybe try that detective agency in Queens. I hear they take anyone." "Miss Draycott," Wolfe said, "before you leave, one question. Who inherits control of the fund if Mr. Lattimore is arrested or dies?" She paused. "That would depend on the partnership agreement. But in practice, I suppose I would, as the senior remaining partner. Why?" "Curiosity. Thank you for satisfying it. Archie, show them both out." I stood up, but Lattimore didn't move. "Mr. Wolfe, I'm willing to pay whatever you ask. Name your price." "There is no price," Wolfe said. "I am not interested. $50,000 for 1 week of your time." That got my attention. 50,000 would cover a lot of bills. Hell, it would cover all the bills, with enough left over for Wolfe to buy those new dendrobium hybrids he'd been mooning over. But Wolfe just shook his head. "Money does not interest me when the work itself is repugnant. Good day, Mr. Lattimore." Lattimore opened his mouth, closed it, then picked up his briefcase. His hands were shaking worse than when he'd arrived. "You're making a mistake. Whoever's behind this isn't going to stop with me. They're too smart, too careful. They'll do it again, to someone else, and maybe next time, that detective in Queens won't turn them away." "Perhaps not," Wolfe said, "but it won't be my problem. Archie, the door." I walked them both to the front hall. Caesar materialized from somewhere, watching with dark eyes as they put on their coats. Ellen left first, her heels clicking angrily on the front steps. Lattimore paused at the door. "Mr. Goodwin," he said quietly, "if I'm dead tomorrow, I hope you'll remember this conversation. I hope you'll remember that I came here for help and was turned away." "I'll remember," I said, "but for what it's worth, Mr. Lattimore, I'd suggest you do what Mr. Wolfe recommended. Get a lawyer, get a bodyguard, and maybe get out of town until this blows over. I can't run, he said. Running would make me look guilty. And besides, I need to be here. I need to find out who's doing this to me. He left. I closed the door and leaned against it, watching through the bulletproof glass as he walked to his car, a black Mercedes parked 3 houses down. He kept looking over his shoulder, jumpy as a rabbit in hunting season. When I went back to the office, Wolfe was pouring his second beer. He didn't look up. So, I said, we're really not taking this case? We are not. $50,000. I heard the figure. That's real money, boss. The kind of money that pays for a lot of orchids. The kind of money that keeps Fritz in butter and cream for a year. The kind of money that... Archie, Wolfe set down his glass. The man is almost certainly guilty. His protestations of innocence are hollow. His emotional state suggests not righteous indignation, but rather the panic of someone whose scheme has collapsed. And even if he is being framed, the investigation would require me to immerse myself in financial records, bank statements, and the mind-numbing tedium of securities law. I would rather eat store-bought cheese than subject myself to that. You don't know he's guilty, I pointed out. You didn't even question him properly. You heard his story for about 10 minutes and decided you were bored. I was bored. What about the death threats? Theatrical nonsense. Probably sent by Miss Draycott herself to add pressure. Or possibly by Mr. Lattimore to himself, to create the appearance of victimization. And if they're real, if someone actually kills him... Wolfe picked up a book from his desk, something in French about viticulture. Then the police will investigate, as is their function. It is not our concern. I sat down and looked at him. He was already reading, or pretending to read. His face had that closed expression that meant the conversation was over. But I wasn't quite done. You know what I think? I think you're scared. He looked up slowly. Scared. Yeah. Scared. This case is complicated. It's not a nice clean murder with a body and suspects and clues you can line up like dominoes. It's messy. It's financial. It's modern. And you hate modern stuff because it makes you work harder. You'd rather sit here with your orchids and your books and your beer and let the world go by. That, Wolfe said coldly, is remarkably impertinent. But am I wrong? We stared at each other. Outside, Minerva barked once, probably at a squirrel. The afternoon light was fading, turning the office golden and then amber. Somewhere upstairs, the plant room thermostats clicked on, maintaining the precise temperature Wolfe demanded for his precious orchids. Finally, he sighed. No, you are not wrong. I am indeed reluctant to engage with the modern financial world. It is a labyrinth of nonsense, designed by clever people to hide simple theft behind complicated language. I dislike it intensely. But nothing. There is no but. The case is declined. We have other matters to attend to. Mrs. Bruner wants us to find her missing Pomeranian. That should be sufficiently undemanding. I opened my mouth to argue further, but the telephone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Goodwin. The voice was familiar, gruff, irritated, with a Brooklyn edge that could sand wood. Inspector Kramer of Manhattan Homicide. Speaking. What can I do for you, Inspector? You can tell me why Bernard Lattimore's name and Wolfe's address were found in a notebook on a dead body. I felt my stomach drop. What dead body? The one we just fished out of the East River. Lattimore. Somebody put 2 bullets in his chest and dumped him off the Williamsburg Bridge. He's been dead about an hour, maybe less. And according to his calendar and the notes in his briefcase, his last appointment before dying was with your boss. I looked at Wolfe. His face had gone very still. We didn't kill him, I said. He left here alive and breathing at 4:30. Yeah, well, he's not alive and breathing now. And Wolfe's name is all over his papers. So I'm coming over. 20 minutes. And Wolfe better have some answers. Because right now, this looks very bad for you boys. The line went dead. I hung up slowly. That was Kramer. I gathered. Lattimore's dead. Murdered. Dumped in the East River. Wolfe closed his eyes. Of course he is. Kramer's coming here. He wants answers. Of course he does. I leaned forward. So here's the thing, boss. We just turned away a man who came to us for help. We turned him away because you were bored. And now he's dead, shot twice in the chest, and the cops think we might be involved. How's that boredom working out for you?" Wolfe opened his eyes and looked at me with an expression that would have frozen the Hudson. "Archie, summon Fritz. Tell him we'll need coffee for the inspector. Strong coffee, and then sit down and write out exactly what occurred this afternoon, verbatim if possible. Every word spoken, every gesture made. When Kramer arrives, we will need to be precise." "Are we taking the case now?" "We don't have a choice," Wolfe said grimly. "We're in it whether we like it or not. Someone killed our potential client an hour after he left this house. That makes it our problem, and I very much dislike having problems thrust upon me." "Welcome to the modern world," I said. He glared at me, then reached for his beer, but I noticed his hand wasn't quite steady. Outside, the dogs began to bark. Caesar's deep bass, Mars's aggressive tenor, Apollo's sharp alerts. Someone was coming up the front walk. Kramer was early, and from the sound of those footsteps, he wasn't coming alone. Inspector Kramer didn't come alone. He brought Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, who had the build of a linebacker and the disposition of a man who just discovered his coffee was decaf. They also brought 3 patrolmen, who stationed themselves outside while Kramer and Stebbins marched up to the brownstone like they owned the place. I opened the door before they could ring. Caesar was at my side, and behind him the rest of the pack had formed up in the hallway. Mars, Apollo, Minerva and Diana, all watching with the kind of focused intensity that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "Inspector," I said pleasantly. "Sergeant, come in. The dogs won't bite unless I tell them to." "Call them off, Goodwin," Kramer growled around the unlit cigar clamped in his teeth. He never smoked in Wolfe's house. Wolfe wouldn't allow it, but he always had one ready like a pacifier for homicide detectives. I snapped my fingers and the dogs melted back, though Caesar stayed close. They knew the rules. Cops were permitted entry but not trusted. Smart dogs. Wolfe was still at his desk when we entered the office. He'd finished his second beer and had a third open, which told me he was more rattled than he wanted to admit. 3 beers before dinner was unusual. "Inspector," he said without rising, "I understand Mr. Lattimore is dead." "You understand correctly." Kramer lowered himself into the red leather chair, the same one Lattimore had occupied less than 2 hours ago. "Shot twice in the chest with a .38, probably a revolver based on the lack of shell casings. Body was dumped off the Williamsburg Bridge, but he was killed somewhere else. Not enough blood at the scene. Time of death approximately 5 to 5:30. We found him at 6:15 when a dock worker spotted him floating." "Unfortunate," Wolfe murmured. "Unfortunate?" Kramer's face reddened. "A man comes to see you about death threats, and 3 hours later he's murdered, and all you can say is unfortunate? What would you prefer, I say? Tragic? Lamentable? The man is equally dead regardless of my choice of adjectives." Stebbins stepped forward. "Watch it, Wolfe. You're in a bad spot here. Lattimore's appointment calendar had your name and address. His briefcase had notes about meeting you at 3:30, and his secretary confirms he was coming here because someone was threatening to kill him. That makes you either the last person to see him alive or someone who knew he was in danger and did nothing about it." "We did see him," I said. "He arrived at 3:15, early. He left at 4:35, alive and well. During that time, he told us about alleged embezzlement at his investment fund and showed us 3 threatening letters. Mr. Wolfe declined to take the case. End of story." "Why'd you decline?" Kramer asked, staring at Wolfe. "I found the matter boring. Financial fraud is not my specialty. I suggested he contact the police, hire a lawyer, and engage a bodyguard. He chose not to follow my advice." "Boring," Kramer repeated. "A man comes to you with death threats and you turn him away because you're bored." "That's substantially accurate. Yes." Kramer pulled the cigar from his mouth and pointed it at Wolfe like a weapon. "I could arrest you right now for obstruction, material witness at minimum, maybe accessory if I get creative." "You could," Wolfe agreed. "But you won't, because I've given you no cause. Mr. Lattimore came here voluntarily. I declined his case voluntarily. He left voluntarily. What occurred afterward is not my responsibility." "Tell me about the letters," Stebbins said. "The death threats. We didn't find them on the body or in his car." I pulled out my notes. 3 letters, typed on an old manual typewriter with a distinctive E key. Good quality bond paper. The first arrived by mail at his office on October 15th. The second was slipped under his apartment door on October 19th. The third was left on his car windshield yesterday, October 28th. Where are they now? He took them with him when he left. Convenient, Stebbins muttered. It's the truth, I said. He came here with 3 letters in a manila envelope. He showed them to us. Mr. Wolfe examined them. Then Lattimore put them back in the envelope and left with them. If they're not on his body, then whoever killed him took them, which suggests the killer didn't want anyone seeing what was in those letters. Kramer chewed on his cigar. What else did Lattimore tell you? I consulted my notes. He claimed someone had embezzled $17.3 million from his investment fund over the past 18 months. He said the theft was framed to look like his work, his passwords, his digital signatures, his laptop showing incriminating searches. He insisted he was being set up, but couldn't prove it. Who by? He didn't know, but his business partner Ellen Draycott showed up here while he was meeting with us. She accused Lattimore of being the embezzler himself, said he was trying to hire Mr. Wolfe to muddy the waters before the fraud went public. That got Kramer's attention. Draycott was here? Arrived at 4 o'clock. They argued. She claimed Lattimore was guilty. He claimed she had just as much access to the accounts as he did. Mr. Wolfe told them both to take their problems to the police and dismissed them. And then Lattimore left? At 4:35, I confirmed. I walked him to the door. He got into a black Mercedes parked 3 houses down and drove away. That was the last we saw of him. What about Draycott? She left first, around 4:30, also alive. Kramer stood up and started pacing, which in Wolfe's office meant he took about 3 steps, hit the wall, turned around and took 3 steps back. So we've got a dead investor, a missing $17 million, and a partner who publicly accused him of embezzlement hours before he was killed. That's motive right there. It is indeed, Wolfe said, which is why you should question Miss Draycott immediately and thoroughly. You should also examine the fund's financial records, interview the other employees, and investigate whoever had access to Mr. Lattimore's digital credentials. The murder weapon will be important. Check for recent purchases or thefts of .38 revolvers. And the disposal of the body suggests someone familiar with the Williamsburg Bridge area, possibly someone who works or lives nearby. Kramer stopped pacing. Since when do you tell me how to run a murder investigation? Since you came to my house asking questions. If you don't want my thoughts, don't solicit them. They glared at each other. It was like watching 2 bulls deciding whether to charge. Finally, Kramer jammed the cigar back in his mouth. We're watching you, Wolfe. Both of you. Lattimore came here for help and ended up dead. That's a hell of a coincidence, and I don't like coincidences. If I find out you're holding back information or obstructing this investigation, I'll have you in a cell so fast your head will spin. Duly noted, Wolfe said. Now if you're finished with your threats, I have dinner waiting. Fritz is preparing coq au vin, and I will not allow it to be ruined by extended police harassment. Kramer looked like he wanted to say more, but Stebbins touched his arm. Come on, Inspector. We've got Draycott's address. Let's go talk to her while the trail's still warm. They left, taking their bad moods with them. I watched from the window as they climbed into an unmarked sedan and drove off, probably heading to Ellen Draycott's apartment to ruin her evening, the way they tried to ruin ours. When I turned back, Wolfe was staring at nothing, his fingers drumming on the desk. It was his thinking rhythm, the one that meant gears were turning and connections were being made. So, I said, we're really doing this now? We have no choice. Kramer is correct. It's a hell of a coincidence, and I don't believe in coincidences any more than he does. You think the killer knew Lattimore was coming here? Possibly. Or the killer was following Lattimore and saw an opportunity. He left here at 4:35. He was killed sometime between 5 and 5:30. That's 30 to 60 minutes. Where did he go? What did he do? Who did he see? His car should tell us, I said. If Kramer's people do their jobs, they'll trace his movements through traffic cameras or witnesses. Perhaps. Wolfe was quiet for a moment. Tell me about Ellen Draycott. Your impressions. I thought back to the blonde in the black dress, the way she'd swept past Fritz and confronted Lattimore without hesitation. Smart, angry, genuinely furious about the embezzlement, or a good actress. She knew details, the exact amount stolen, the timeline, the audit schedule. She also knew Lattimore was coming here, which means she has a source inside his organization. Could be his secretary, like she said, or could be someone else. And her accusation of embezzlement, did you believe it? I believed she believed it. Whether it's true is another question. Wolfe nodded slowly. She benefits substantially from Lattimore's death. With him gone, she inherits control of the fund. Even if the fund is damaged by scandal, there will be assets to salvage, clients to retain, a business to rebuild. Dead, Lattimore can be blamed for everything. Alive, he could defend himself. So she's suspect number one. She's certainly a suspect, but there are others. Whoever embezzled the money, for instance, if it wasn't Lattimore himself, that person would have strong motivation to silence him before he could prove his innocence. And then there's the question of the death threat letters. What about them? They were theatrical, as I said, but they were also specific. The scheme ends, or you do. What scheme? The embezzlement. If so, why would the embezzler threaten Lattimore with exposure? It makes no sense, unless, he trailed off, frowning. Unless what? Unless there are two separate crimes. The embezzlement is one crime, committed by one person for financial gain. The murder is a second crime, committed by someone who wanted Lattimore dead for different reasons. The death threats may have been a smokescreen, designed to connect the two crimes and mislead investigators. I sat down and thought about that. So you're saying someone framed Lattimore for embezzlement, and then someone else killed him? That's a lot of coincidence. No, I'm saying someone framed Lattimore for embezzlement, and then that same someone killed him when he started looking for help. The death threats were part of the frame designed to make his eventual murder look like the work of an angry investor or a vengeful partner. Ellen Draycott. Possibly, but we need more information, much more. He looked at me. Tomorrow morning you will begin a thorough investigation. I want to know everything about Lattimore Capital Group. The employees, the clients, the financial structure. I want to know about Lattimore's personal life, his enemies, his friends, his habits. I want to know about Ellen Draycott's background and her relationship with Lattimore. And I want to know who had the technical knowledge to steal $17 million and frame someone else for it. That's a lot of ground to cover. Then you'd better start early. I also want you to contact Saul. He may be useful for surveillance work. Saul Panzer was the best freelance detective in New York, and possibly anywhere else. If we needed eyes on someone, Saul was the man for the job. I'll call him tonight, I said. What about you? I will think, and I will examine what we know so far. He picked up the notes I'd written about the afternoon's events. There's something here, something in what was said or done, a detail that doesn't fit properly. I need to find it. The dinner bell rang, Fritz's signal that food was ready. Wolfe stood with effort and moved toward the dining room. But at the door he paused. Archie. Mr. Lattimore came here because he was frightened. He believed someone wanted him dead, and he was correct. We turned him away, and now he's dead. That failure weighs on me. We didn't know, I said. We couldn't have known. That's immaterial. We should have helped him. Instead, I allowed my boredom and my prejudices to cloud my judgment. That mistake may have cost him his life. I don't intend to make another mistake on this case. He went into the dining room. I followed after a moment, thinking about Lattimore's last words at the door. If I'm dead tomorrow, I hope you'll remember this conversation. I remembered. I'd remember for a long time. The next morning, Thursday, I was up at 7:30 and out the door by 8. The October air had a bite to it, the kind of cold that promised winter wasn't far off. The dogs had their morning patrol, Caesar and Mars in the front, Apollo ranging wide, Minerva and Diana covering the flanks. They worked like a military unit, which made sense since Wolfe had trained them that way. A fortress, he'd said. The brownstone was a fortress, and these were its guards. My first stop was Lattimore Capital Group's office, a sleek glass tower in Midtown on 57th Street. The kind of building where the lobby had marble floors and the elevators moved so smoothly you couldn't tell you were moving. The kind of building where money went to make more money, quietly and efficiently. The reception area on the 42nd floor was subdued elegance. Grey carpet, modern art that probably cost more than a car, leather furniture that whispered wealth. A receptionist with perfect hair and a practiced smile looked up as I entered.
Can I help you?
I gave her my card. Archie Goodwin. I'm investigating the death of Bernard Lattimore, on behalf of a concerned party. I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge now." The smile vanished. "Mr. Lattimore's death has been a terrible shock to everyone here. I'm not sure. I understand. It's difficult, but I'm trying to find out who killed him, which I imagine is something everyone here would want. So if you could tell whoever's running things that I'm here, I'd appreciate it." She hesitated, then picked up the phone and spoke quietly. A minute later, a woman emerged from the inner offices. Not Ellen Draycott. This was someone younger, late 20s maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and glasses that suggested she spent her days staring at computer screens. "Mr. Goodwin, I'm Josephine Kern, head of operations. Please come with me." I followed her through a maze of cubicles and glass-walled offices. The place was quiet, subdued. People worked at their computers, but the energy was wrong. Grief and uncertainty hung in the air like fog. Kern led me to a conference room, with a view of Central Park, and closed the door. "I assume you're aware of Mr. Lattimore's murder?" "I am. I saw him yesterday afternoon, about 3 hours before he died." "Yes," Ellen told us. "You're working with Nero Wolfe?" "That's right." She sat down, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Lattimore was a good man. Whatever Ellen says, whatever the audit shows, I don't believe he stole from the fund. He wouldn't do that." "You worked with him long?" 4 years. I started as an analyst and worked my way up. Bernard, Mr. Lattimore, he gave me opportunities. He trusted me, and I trusted him. "Tell me about the embezzlement. How was it discovered?" She took a breath. 3 weeks ago, we had a routine internal audit. One of our junior accountants noticed that some of the trades in our records didn't match the confirmations from our custodian bank. At first, we thought it was a clerical error. It happens sometimes, data entry mistakes, timing differences, but when we dug deeper, we found a pattern. Money was being moved into accounts that didn't exist in our official records, shell companies with foreign registrations. The transfers were authorized with Mr. Lattimore's digital signature, using his passwords and credentials. How much total? 17.3 million, spread over 18 months. Small amounts at first, then larger as the scheme progressed. It was sophisticated. Whoever did it knew our systems intimately. Who had access to Lattimore's credentials? That's the problem. Only Mr. Lattimore should have had access. Our security protocols are supposed to be airtight. But clearly someone got in. Either they stole his passwords, or they had help from inside. Or Lattimore did it himself, I suggested. Her jaw tightened. "No, I don't believe that." "Why not? 17 million is a lot of money." "Because he was already rich. His partnership stake in this firm is worth more than what was stolen. His personal investments are worth another 20 million. His apartment alone is worth 8 million. Why would he risk all of that to steal 17 million in a way that would obviously be discovered during an audit?" It was the same argument Lattimore himself had made, and it was a good one. "What about Ellen Draycott?" I asked. "Did she have access to his credentials?" Kern hesitated. "Ellen is complicated. She and Bernard built this firm together. They trusted each other completely. She had access to almost everything. Our systems, our accounts, our client relationships. If anyone could have stolen his credentials, it would be her." "You think she did it?" "I think she benefits from Bernard being dead and disgraced. With him gone, she controls everything. The clients who stay, the assets we salvage, the firm's reputation, it all flows through her now. And she was very quick to accuse Bernard publicly. That struck me as convenient. I made notes. Who else should I talk to?" "Philip Renshaw. He's our IT director. He oversees all our systems and security. If someone hacked into Bernard's account, Philip would be the one to figure out how. And there's Margaret Ashford, Bernard's executive assistant. She knew his schedule, his passwords. She had to for administrative purposes. And she's been acting strange since the audit results came out." "Strange how?" "Nervous. Distracted. She called in sick yesterday, which she never does. And when I tried to reach her at home last night, she didn't answer." "That was interesting. Give me her address." Kern wrote it down along with Renshaw's contact information. "Mr. Goodwin, I want you to know that most of us here don't believe Bernard was guilty. We think Ellen is using this scandal to take control of the firm. But we can't prove it. We need help." "That's what I'm here for," I said. "One more question. Did Lattimore have any enemies? Anyone who might want him dead beyond the embezzlement? She thought about it. There was a client, Raymond Keller. He invested heavily with us 2 years ago and lost money when one of our arbitrage positions went wrong. It wasn't fraud, just a bad trade. But Keller blamed Bernard personally. He threatened to sue, threatened to destroy Bernard's reputation. Eventually he settled, but he was bitter about it. Very bitter. Where can I find him? He has an office in the Chrysler Building, import-export business, mostly Asian markets. But Mr. Goodwin, I don't think he'd actually kill anyone. He was angry, but not violent. People surprise you, I said. Thanks for your time, Miss Kern. If you think of anything else, call me at this number. I gave her my card and left. On my way out, I passed a glass-walled office where Ellen Draycott sat at a desk, talking on the phone. She saw me and her eyes narrowed, but she didn't wave or acknowledge me, just watched until I disappeared into the elevator. Outside, I called Saul Panzer from a payphone on the corner. He answered on the second ring. Saul, it's Archie. I need surveillance on Ellen Draycott. Starting now, continuous coverage. I want to know where she goes, who she meets, what she does. Can you handle it? For you? Sure. What am I looking for? Anything suspicious. She's a suspect in a murder, but she doesn't know we're watching yet. Keep it quiet. Quiet's my specialty. What's the address? I gave him the office location and Ellen's home address, which I'd gotten from Kern. Saul said he'd be in position within the hour. Good man. My next stop was Margaret Ashford's apartment in Chelsea. It was a walk-up in a converted brownstone. Nothing fancy. I rang the bell 3 times before she answered on the intercom. Who is it? Archie Goodwin. I'm investigating Bernard Lattimore's death. I need to ask you some questions. Long pause. Go away. Miss Ashford, I can stand here and keep ringing, or you can give me 5 minutes. Your choice. Another pause, then the buzzer sounded. I climbed 3 flights to find her door open a crack, chain still attached. Through the gap, I could see a woman in her 40s, pale and drawn, with red-rimmed eyes. What do you want? I want to know why you're scared, I said, and I want to know what you know about the embezzlement. I don't know anything. You were Lattimore's executive assistant. You knew everything. So either you talk to me, or you talk to the police, and the police are a lot less patient than I am. The door closed. I heard the chain rattle, and then it opened fully. Margaret Ashford looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her apartment was neat, but showed signs of distress. Drawers open, papers scattered, a suitcase half-packed on the couch. You're running, I observed. I'm leaving New York. Taking a vacation. I need a break after everything. Or you're running because you're involved. I'm not involved, her voice cracked. I didn't steal anything. I didn't kill anyone. I'm just scared, okay? I'm scared because I know something, and if the wrong person finds out I know it, I'll end up like Bernard. Now we were getting somewhere. What do you know? She sat down on the couch, hands twisted together. 2 weeks ago I was working late. Everyone else had gone home. I needed to access Bernard's calendar to schedule a meeting, so I used the master password we keep in the office safe. But when I logged in, I saw something strange. Someone else was logged into his account at the same time, from a different IP address. Someone was in his account while you were in it? Yes, and they were accessing the trade authorization system, the one that requires his digital signature. I watched for maybe 30 seconds, trying to figure out what was happening. Then I got scared and logged out. But I saw enough. Saw what? The IP address. It wasn't from Bernard's home or his office computer. It was from inside our building, but from a different floor, the 38th floor. Who's on the 38th floor? Ellen Draycott. Her private office. Bingo. Did you tell anyone? I tried to tell Bernard the next day, but Ellen was with him in his office. I couldn't get him alone, and then the audit happened, and everything exploded. Bernard was being accused, Ellen was in control, and I realized that if I said anything, Ellen would know I knew. And then, she swallowed hard. And then Bernard died. He was murdered, Mr. Goodwin. And I think Ellen did it, or had it done. And if she finds out I saw her in his account, I'm next. Why didn't you go to the police? And tell them what? That I saw an IP address? That Ellen was logged into Bernard's account? She'd say she was doing administrative work, helping Bernard with something, checking on trades. She'd have an explanation, and I'd look paranoid. But Bernard's dead, and I know what I saw. I leaned forward. Miss Ashford, you need to tell this to the police. Inspector Kramer at Manhattan Homicide. I'll go with you if you want. I can't. I'm too scared. I just want to leave, go somewhere safe, and let this all blow over. It won't blow over, and running makes you look guilty. If you want to help Lattimore, if you want justice, you need to tell the truth. She looked at me with exhausted eyes. Justice. Bernard came to see your boss yesterday, didn't he? Asking for help? Yes. And did Nero Wolfe help him? I hesitated. No, not in time. Then why should I trust you now? Bernard trusted the great detective, and it got him killed. Maybe I'm better off running. I couldn't argue with that. Not really. But I tried anyway, because whoever killed Lattimore won't stop with him. If they're willing to commit murder to cover up embezzlement, they'll kill again if they have to. You're a witness. You're a threat. Running just delays the inevitable. She was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded. All right, I'll go to the police. But you come with me, and I want protection. I want police protection. Until whoever did this is arrested. I'll arrange it, I promised. Get your things. We'll go now. While she gathered her purse and locked her suitcase, I used her phone to call the brownstone. Fritz answered. Fritz, it's Archie. Is he awake? Mr. Wolfe is in the plant rooms. He said he would be down at 11. Tell him I'm bringing a witness to Kramer. She has information about Ellen Draycott accessing Lattimore's account. This is big. I will tell him. Archie, be careful. There was a man watching the house this morning. Caesar noticed him. What kind of man? A watcher. He stood across the street for 20 minutes, just looking at the brownstone. Then he left. That was troubling. Tell Wolfe, and keep the dogs close. Always. I hung up and looked at Margaret Ashford. She was pale but determined. Ready? As I'll ever be. We left her apartment and walked to the corner to hail a cab. The street was busy with morning traffic, people heading to work, delivery trucks rumbling past. Normal city sounds, normal city life. But I had the sudden feeling we were being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the street, the windows, the parked cars. There, across the street, near a newsstand, a man in a grey overcoat, pretending to read a paper, but his eyes were on us. When he saw me looking, he folded the paper and walked away quickly. Miss Ashford, I said quietly, we need to move, now. What's wrong? Someone's following us. Come on. I grabbed her arm and we started walking fast, heading toward 7th Avenue, where the crowds would be thicker. Behind us, I heard footsteps, quick footsteps, getting close. Run, I said. We ran. We didn't stop running until we hit the 7th Avenue subway station. I pulled Margaret Ashford down the stairs, through the turnstile, and onto a downtown platform just as a train was pulling in. We jumped on, and I watched through the window as the man in the grey overcoat appeared at the top of the stairs, saw us, and swore. The doors closed. The train lurched forward. We were safe. For now. Margaret was breathing hard, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Who was that? I don't know, but whoever it was, they were following you, or me, or both of us. I guided her to a seat. We're getting off at the next stop and taking a cab straight to police headquarters. No more walking, no more chances. She nodded, too scared to argue. We got off at 14th Street, caught a cab, and 15 minutes later, we were at One Police Plaza. I asked for Kramer and was told he was out on a call, but Sergeant Stebbins was available. Close enough. Stebbins looked surprised to see me. Goodwin, twice in 12 hours. I'm starting to think you enjoy my company. I brought you a witness, I said. Margaret Ashford. She was Bernard Lattimore's executive assistant. She has information about who accessed his computer account to set up the embezzlement. That got his attention. He took us to an interview room. Grey walls, metal table, the kind of place where confessions happened. Margaret told her story about seeing Ellen Draycott's IP address in Lattimore's account. Stebbins took notes, asked pointed questions, and by the end he was leaning back with a thoughtful expression. This is good, he said. This gives us probable cause to get a warrant for Draycott's computers. We can trace the IP address. Check her access logs, see what else she was doing in Lattimore's system. Miss Ashford needs protection, I said. Someone followed us this morning. A man in a grey overcoat, deliberately watching her apartment. You sure he was watching you? Sure enough that we ran. Sure enough that I'm not letting her go home until you put a guard on her. Stebbins nodded. All right, we'll put her up in a safe location. Miss Ashford, you'll need to stay with us for a day or two while we process this information and make arrests. Are you comfortable with that? She looked relieved. Yes, thank you. Good. Officer Blake will get you set up. Goodwin, you can go. But tell Wolfe we'll want to talk to him again soon. This case is getting complicated, and I want to make sure you two aren't holding anything back. We never hold back from the police, I said with a straight face. We're model citizens. Stebbins snorted. Get out of here. I left Margaret in good hands and caught another cab back to the brownstone. It was nearly 11:30, which meant Wolfe would be down from the plant rooms and expecting a report. But first, I wanted to check in with Saul. I used the phone in the front hall. Saul answered on the first ring. Talk to me, I said. Your Miss Draycott is having a busy morning, Saul said. She left her office at 9:15 and went to a law firm in Rockefeller Center. Stayed for 45 minutes. Then she went to a bank, Chase Manhattan on Park Avenue. Stayed there for 30 minutes. Now she's at a restaurant on 53rd, meeting with someone. Who? Male, mid-50s, well-dressed. They're having an intense conversation. Lots of hand gestures. She looks upset. Can you get a photo? Already got 3. I'll have them developed and sent over by this afternoon. You're a prince, Saul. Keep watching. I want to know everyone she talks to, everywhere she goes. You got it. I hung up and went to the office. Wolfe was at his desk with a beer and the New York Times crossword, which he did in pen because he was a show-off. He looked up when I entered. Ah, Archie. Fritz said you called. A productive morning? Depends on your definition of productive. I got chased by a tail, delivered a witness to the police, and confirmed that Ellen Draycott is probably our embezzler. How's your morning been? Quiet, which I prefer. Sit down and tell me everything. I sat and gave him the full report. My visit to Lattimore Capital, the conversation with Josephine Kern, Margaret Ashford's revelation about the IP address, and the man in the grey overcoat who'd followed us. Wolfe listened without interrupting, his eyes half closed in that way that meant he was recording every word. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. Then, Miss Ashford saw Ellen Draycott's IP address in Lattimore's account 2 weeks ago. That establishes that Draycott had access to his credentials and was actively using them to authorize fraudulent transfers. Combined with her motive inheriting control of the fund, this makes her the primary suspect for both the embezzlement and the murder. That's what I figured. However, Wolfe held up a finger. There are complications. If Draycott killed Lattimore, she did so within an hour of his leaving this brownstone. That's a remarkably short timeline. It suggests either careful planning or spontaneous action. Which was it? Planning, I said. She knew he was coming here because his secretary told her. She could have arranged to intercept him after he left. Possibly. Or she could have followed him from here, seen an opportunity, and taken it. But that requires her to have been armed, prepared to commit murder on short notice. Does she strike you as someone capable of shooting a man twice in the chest? I thought about Ellen Draycott, her anger, her confidence, her cold fury when she'd confronted Lattimore in this very office. Maybe, she's ruthless, but I don't know if she's violent. Precisely, she's a financial criminal, not a killer, which suggests she may have hired someone to do the actual murder. The man in the grey overcoat, who followed you this morning, could he be her hired muscle? Could be, but we didn't get a good look at him. Saul's watching Draycott now. If she meets with anyone suspicious, he'll document it. Wolfe nodded. Good, but we cannot rely solely on Draycott as our suspect. We need to examine alternatives. Who else benefits from Lattimore's death? His wife, if he has one. He does. Cynthia Lattimore. I had Fritz look up the society pages this morning. She's significantly younger than her late husband, 32 to his 58. They married 3 years ago. She comes from old Boston money, the kind that's been declining for generations. Marrying Lattimore gave her access to new money, and his death makes her a wealthy widow, unless the embezzlement scandal wipes out his estate. True, But even a damaged estate would leave her with his apartment, his personal investments, his art collection, and if she can claim he was framed, which is technically true, she might preserve most of his wealth. I pulled out my notebook. I should talk to her. Yes, but approach carefully. Grieving widows are either genuinely devastated or excellent actresses. You'll need to determine which she is. What about the angry client Josephine Kern mentioned? Raymond Keller? Also worth investigating. A man bitter enough to threaten Lattimore over a bad investment might be bitter enough to kill him, particularly if that investment represented a significant portion of his wealth. I'll add him to the list. I checked my watch. It's almost noon. If I head out now, I can catch Cynthia Lattimore at home and Keller at his office this afternoon. Before you go, contact Saul again. I want surveillance on Cynthia Lattimore as well. If she's involved, she'll make mistakes. The guilty always do. The phone rang before I could respond. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Mr. Goodwin. The voice was male, educated, with a faint British accent. My name is Philip Renshaw. I'm the IT director at Lattimore Capital. I understand you were in our office this morning asking questions. That's right. You have information for me? Perhaps. But I'd prefer to discuss it in person, not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere private? Somewhere that isn't the office. Why not the office? Because I don't trust the office. I don't trust anyone there right now. Please, Mr. Goodwin, this is important. It's about the embezzlement, and about who really had access to Bernard's accounts. I looked at Wolfe. He nodded. All right, I said. Where and when? There's a cafe on Lexington and 62nd. The Blue Kettle. Can you be there at 1 o'clock? I'll be there. How will I recognize you? I'll be the one looking nervous and carrying a laptop bag. You can't miss me. He hung up. I put down the phone and looked at Wolfe. Philip Renshaw wants to meet. Says he has information about who really accessed Lattimore's accounts. Interesting. He's risking his position by talking to you. That suggests either conscience or self-interest. Or both. Either way, I'm meeting him at 1. Be careful, Archie. If Renshaw knows something dangerous, he may be a target, and if he's involved in the crime, this could be a trap. I'll keep my eyes open, I promised. I stood up, checked that I had my notebook and enough cash for cabs, and headed for the door. Caesar was waiting in the hallway, as if he knew I was leaving. He followed me to the front door and watched as I put on my coat. Guard the fort, I told him. I'll be back by dinner. He made a low sound in his throat. Acknowledgement, not quite agreement. Smart dog. The Blue Kettle was one of those Upper East Side cafes that catered to ladies who lunch, and men who wanted to be seen lunching with ladies. White tablecloths, soft lighting, waiters who moved like ballet dancers. I got there at 12:50 and took a table near the back, where I could watch the door. Philip Renshaw arrived at 1 o'clock exactly. He was mid-30s, thin and pale like he spent his life indoors, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested too much coffee and not enough sleep. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt under a blazer, and he clutched his laptop bag like it contained nuclear codes. He spotted me. I'd positioned myself so he couldn't miss me, and walked over quickly. Mr. Goodwin? That's me. Sit down, Mr. Renshaw. You look like you need a drink. I need several drinks, but coffee will have to do. He ordered an espresso when the waiter came by, then leaned forward. Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd come. You said you had information about the embezzlement. That's worth a trip uptown. It is, but first I need to know, are you working for Ellen? No, I'm working for Nero Wolfe, and by extension, I'm trying to find out who killed Bernard Lattimore and who stole $17 million from his fund. Good, because if you were working for Ellen, I'd walk out right now. I don't trust her. I don't trust anything about this situation. Why not? He waited until the waiter delivered his espresso and left. Then he opened his laptop bag and pulled out a manila folder. Because Ellen asked me to falsify evidence. 3 days ago, right after the audit revealed the fraud. She called me into her office and told me she needed me to clarify some of the digital logs showing who accessed Bernard's accounts. Clarify how? She wanted me to erase evidence of her own access and make it look like Bernard was the only one who'd used his credentials to authorize the fraudulent transfers. She said it was for the good of the firm, to preserve client confidence. But what she was really asking me to do was help her frame a dead man. Dead man? This was 3 days ago. Lattimore wasn't dead yet. Renshaw's face went pale. No, you're right. But Ellen talked about him in the past tense. Bernard won't be able to defend himself, she said. We need to protect the firm's reputation. At the time, I thought she meant he'd be arrested and disgraced. But now that he's actually dead, he trailed off. You think she knew he was going to die? I think she planned it. Or at least, she knew it was coming. Why else would she talk about him like he was already gone? I made notes. Did you do what she asked? Did you falsify the logs? No. I told her I needed time to think about it, to figure out the technical aspects. But really, I was stalling, because what she was asking me to do was illegal. Obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, maybe even conspiracy. I could lose my license, go to jail. And for what? To protect Ellen Draycott. So the real logs still exist. The ones showing Ellen accessed Lattimore's accounts. Yes, I made backup copies before Ellen could ask me to delete them. He tapped the folder. It's all here. IP addresses, timestamps, access logs. Ellen was in Bernard's account dozens of times over the past 18 months. She authorized transfers, created shell companies, moved money around. She's the embezzler, Mr. Goodwin, not Bernard. He was just the scapegoat. I reached for the folder, but Renshaw pulled it back. Not here. Too exposed. But I'll give you copies. I have them on a flash drive. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. Everything's on here. Take it to the police, to Nero Wolfe, to whoever can stop Ellen before she destroys the firm completely. I took the drive and pocketed it carefully. This is good work, Mr. Renshaw. This could be the evidence we need to put Ellen away for both embezzlement and murder. I hope so, because I'm terrified. Ellen knows I have access to these logs. She might guess that I made copies, and if she's willing to kill Bernard to cover her tracks... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Where are you staying? A hotel in Queens, under a fake name. I'm not going back to my apartment until this is over. Smart. Stay hidden. Don't contact Ellen. Don't go to the office. If she tries to reach you, don't respond. And if anything happens, if you see anyone suspicious, if you feel threatened, call the police immediately. Inspector Kramer at Manhattan Homicide. Tell him Archie Goodwin sent you. Renshaw nodded, finished his espresso in one gulp, and stood up. I need to go. Thank you for listening, Mr. Goodwin, and please stop Ellen before she hurts anyone else. He left quickly, walking fast like a man who expected someone to grab him at any moment. I waited a few minutes, paid for both our drinks, and left by a different door. Old habits. If someone was watching, let them work for it. I caught a cab back to the brownstone, the flash drive burning a hole in my pocket, like evidence always does. This was it. This was the proof we needed to nail Ellen Draycott for embezzlement, and maybe for murder too. Wolfe would be pleased. Hell, even Kramer might crack a smile. But something bothered me. Something Renshaw had said. Ellen talked about Bernard in the past tense 3 days ago, before he died. That suggested foreknowledge. That suggested planning. But if Ellen planned the murder carefully, why do it so soon after Lattimore visited Wolfe? Why not wait, let things cool down, reduce suspicion? Unless she didn't plan it. Unless something happened that forced her hand. I thought about the timeline. Lattimore came to the brownstone at 3:15 on Wednesday. Ellen showed up at 4, confronted him publicly. They both left around 4:30. Lattimore was killed between 5 and 5:30, shot twice and dumped in the East River. 1 hour, maybe less. What happened in that hour? Where did Lattimore go? Who did he see? I needed to talk to Cynthia Lattimore. The widow might know something, her husband's plans, his state of mind, who he feared. And I still needed to check out Raymond Keller, the angry client who'd threatened Lattimore's reputation. The cab dropped me at the brownstone at 2 o'clock. I paid the driver and started up the steps, but before I reached the door, Caesar barked from inside. Sharp, urgent, warning. I froze. Caesar only barked like that when there was real danger. The front door opened. Fritz stood there, his usually calm face tight with tension. Archie, thank God, we have visitors, unpleasant ones. Who? Mrs. Lattimore and a lawyer. They are demanding to see Mr. Wolfe. They say he caused Bernard Lattimore's death, and they intend to sue for wrongful death and criminal negligence. Mr. Wolfe is not pleased. Of course he wasn't. I followed Fritz inside. The 5 Dobermans were in full defensive mode, Caesar at the front, Mars and Apollo flanking, Minerva and Diana covering the rear. They formed a living wall between the front hall and the office, where I could hear raised voices. A woman's voice, high and angry. "Refused to see me. My husband came to you for help, and you turned him away, and now he's dead. You're responsible." And Wolfe's voice, cold and controlled. "Madam, I am responsible for nothing except my own actions. Your husband chose to leave this house. What happened afterward is beyond my control." I walked into the office. The woman was mid-30s, blonde, beautiful in the way that came from good genes and better surgeons. She wore a black designer suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and her eyes were red from crying or from skillfully applied makeup designed to look like crying. Beside her stood a man in a grey suit with silver hair and the kind of face that screamed expensive lawyer. He had a briefcase open on his lap and was taking notes. "Ah," Wolfe said when he saw me. "Archie, you have returned. Mrs. Lattimore was just explaining her intention to sue me for wrongful death. Perhaps you can help her understand why that would be both futile and foolish." "Mrs. Lattimore," I said politely, "I'm Archie Goodwin. I'm sorry for your loss, but Mr. Wolfe is right. He had no obligation to help your husband, and his decision not to take the case doesn't make him liable for what happened afterward. He could have saved him." Her voice broke. "Bernard was scared. He came here asking for help, and Nero Wolfe sent him away because he was bored. Bored. My husband is dead because of that arrogance." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mrs. Lattimore is within her rights to pursue legal action. Mr. Wolfe had a duty of care once Mr. Lattimore sought his professional services. His refusal to act given the circumstances may constitute negligence." "That's nonsense," I said. "Mr. Wolfe is a private detective, not a police officer. He has no duty to take any case. And your client's husband was killed by someone who shot him twice in the chest, not by Nero Wolfe's refusal to investigate embezzlement. Embezzlement that might have led to his murder." Cynthia Lattimore was on her feet now. "If Wolfe had investigated, if he'd found out who was framing Bernard, maybe the killer would have been caught before. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. The lawyer patted her shoulder awkwardly and looked at Wolfe. "My client is distraught. Perhaps we should continue this conversation when emotions are less raw." "An excellent suggestion," Wolfe said. "Please leave." "We're not done," the lawyer said. "Expect to hear from me officially, and expect a subpoena if this goes to trial." "I eagerly await it," Wolfe said dryly. They left, Cynthia Lattimore still crying, the lawyer guiding her out with one hand on her elbow. I watched them through the window as they got into a Blacktown car and drove away. When I turned back, Wolfe was pouring his afternoon beer with hands that shook very slightly. That meant he was angry. Wolfe rarely showed emotion, but when he did, it was usually as controlled fury. "They have no case," I said. "I know, but they've upset Fritz, and they've disrupted my afternoon, and I dislike both intensely. Did you learn anything useful today? Or was it all wasted time and theatrical widows?" I pulled out the flash drive and set it on his desk. "Philip Renshaw gave me this. It contains digital logs proving that Ellen Draycott accessed Lattimore's accounts dozens of times over 18 months. She's the embezzler, no question, and she asked Renshaw to falsify the evidence 3 days ago, before Lattimore died. She talked about him in the past tense, like she knew he was already dead." Wolfe picked up the flash drive and examined it. "This is excellent work, Archie. With this evidence, the police can arrest Draycott for embezzlement, and possibly for murder. Motive, means, opportunity. She had them all. So we're done? We hand this over to Kramer and let him close the case?" "Perhaps." Wolfe set down the drive. "But something troubles me. The timeline is too compressed. Ellen Draycott is a sophisticated criminal. She stole $17 million over 18 months, using careful planning and technical expertise. Such a person does not commit impulsive murder, yet Lattimore was killed within hours of leaving this brownstone. Why the urgency? Maybe she panicked. Maybe she thought Lattimore was getting too close to the truth. Possibly. But consider, Lattimore came here seeking help. We declined. He left at 4:35. Ellen Draycott left at 4:30. That's a 5-minute window. Could she have followed him, intercepted him, killed him, and disposed of the body, all within an hour? I thought about it. It's tight, but possible, especially if she had help. The man in the grey overcoat who followed Margaret Ashford this morning could be her hired gun. Indeed, but we're speculating. We need more facts. You mentioned 2 other potential suspects, Raymond Keller and Cynthia Lattimore herself. Did you learn anything about them? Not yet. I was about to investigate when Renshaw called, and then Mrs. Lattimore showed up here throwing accusations around. But I can follow up this afternoon. Do so. I want to know about Keller's financial situation and his relationship with Lattimore, and I want to know about Cynthia Lattimore's marriage. Was it happy? Was there insurance? Does she benefit more from his death than from his life? You think the widow might be involved? I think everyone is a suspect until proven otherwise. The Grieving Widow Act is a classic defense, but genuine grief doesn't usually arrive with a lawyer and threats of lawsuits within 24 hours of the death. That was a good point. I grabbed my coat. I'll check out Keller first, then swing by Mrs. Lattimore's place if there's time. Saul should have photos of Ellen's morning activities by now too. Excellent. And Archie, be careful. Whoever killed Lattimore is still out there, and they've proven willing to kill to protect their secrets. Don't give them a reason to add you to their list. I'll keep my head down, I promised. But as I left the brownstone and headed back into the city, I had the feeling that keeping my head down wasn't going to be enough. This case was getting bigger, more complicated, and more dangerous with every hour. And somewhere out there, a killer was watching, waiting, ready to strike again if necessary. The only question was, who would be next? Raymond Keller's office was in the Chrysler Building, which meant I got to ride one of those Art Deco elevators that made you feel like you were ascending to heaven instead of just the 44th floor. His company, Keller Import-Export, occupied a suite with windows overlooking the East River. Nice view, expensive rent, the kind of operation that suggested money, even if that money was currently in question. The receptionist was a young man with slicked-back hair and a tie that probably cost more than my suit. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think Mr. Keller will want to see me. Tell him I'm investigating Bernard Lattimore's murder." The receptionist's face went carefully blank. "One moment, please." He disappeared into the back offices. I waited, studying the decor, Asian art on the walls, a bronze Buddha on the reception desk, silk screens depicting mountains and rivers. The import-export business, apparently, had good taste. The receptionist returned. "Mr. Keller will see you. Please follow me." Raymond Keller's private office was twice the size of Wolfe's, with a mahogany desk that could double as a dining table and leather chairs that whispered luxury. Keller himself was mid-50s, athletic build, with iron-grey hair and the kind of tan that came from tennis courts and Caribbean vacations. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie, and an expression that suggested I was interrupting something important. "Mr. Goodwin," he didn't offer to shake hands. "My assistant said you're investigating Bernard Lattimore's death." "Why? The police have already been here." "I work for Nero Wolfe. We're conducting our own investigation." "The famous Nero Wolfe." Keller's smile was thin. "I've heard of him. Brilliant detective, doesn't leave his house, solves impossible crimes. Is Lattimore's death an impossible crime? It's a murder that happened fast and clean, which usually means someone knew what they were doing. I'm trying to figure out who." "And you think I might have killed him?" Keller leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Because of a bad investment 2 years ago? Is that what this is about?" "You did threaten him. According to witnesses, you threatened to destroy his reputation." "I did, and I meant it. Bernard Lattimore cost me $4 million with a risky arbitrage position that he promised was virtually risk-free. It wasn't. The position collapsed. I lost everything I'd invested, and Lattimore offered me platitudes and a settlement that barely covered half my losses. That would make most people angry." "Angry? Mr. Goodwin?" I was furious. I wanted to sue him into bankruptcy. I wanted to drag his name through every financial publication in the country. I wanted him to suffer the way I suffered. "So you killed him?" Keller laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "No, I didn't kill him, because killing him would have been too easy. Death is quick. What I wanted was for Bernard Lattimore to live long enough to see his empire crumble, his reputation destroyed, his clients abandon him. I wanted him to feel the humiliation and the loss that I felt, and now someone's robbed me of that pleasure by putting 2 bullets in his chest. You sound disappointed. I am disappointed. Bernard got off easy. He died before the embezzlement scandal could fully destroy him. He died before his clients could sue him, before the SEC could file charges, before every financial newspaper in the country could publish his mugshot. That's not justice. That's mercy. I studied him. He was telling the truth, or at least he believed he was telling the truth. The bitterness was genuine. The anger was genuine. But was it enough to drive him to murder? Where were you Wednesday afternoon, between 4:30 and 6? Here, in this office. I had conference calls with suppliers in Shanghai and Singapore. My assistant can confirm it, as can the phone records. And you didn't hire anyone to kill Lattimore for you? Keller's eyes went cold. Mr. Goodwin, I'm a businessman, not a gangster. I settle my disputes through lawyers and lawsuits, not hired killers. If I wanted Bernard dead, I would have done it 2 years ago when the wound was fresh. Not now, when he was already on his way to prison. Fair enough. I stood up. One more question. Did you know about the embezzlement before it became public? He hesitated. I suspected something was wrong. About 6 months ago, I started hearing rumors, clients questioning their returns, trades that didn't quite match the statements. I made some inquiries, asked around, but I couldn't prove anything, and Bernard was too well connected for me to accuse him without evidence. Who else knew? Who else suspected? Half of Wall Street, probably. Bernard ran a tight ship, but there were whispers. People talk, Mr. Goodwin. They always talk. And when $17 million goes missing, the talk gets louder. I thanked him for his time and left. The elevator ride down gave me time to think. Keller had motive, revenge for a bad investment, but his alibi sounded solid, and his personality didn't fit. He was the type who preferred slow legal torture to quick violence. He wanted Lattimore to suffer, not to die cleanly. That left Ellen Draycott as the primary suspect. She had motive, means, opportunity, and the digital evidence to prove her guilt for the embezzlement. But Wolfe was right. The timeline bothered me. Why kill Lattimore so quickly? Why take such a risk? Unless there was something I was missing. Some piece of information that made Lattimore's immediate death necessary. I checked my watch. 3:30. Still time to visit Cynthia Lattimore before returning to the brownstone for dinner. But first, I needed to check in with Saul. I found a payphone on the corner and dialed his number. He answered immediately. "Tell me something good," I said. "How about something interesting instead? Your Miss Draycott has been very busy." After her meeting at the restaurant, she went to a private bank vault in Midtown. Stayed there for 20 minutes. Then she went to a travel agency and picked up tickets. Tickets to where? Switzerland. First-class tickets on a flight leaving tomorrow night, one way. That was interesting indeed. Planning a trip, is she? Looks like it. She also withdrew a substantial amount of cash from the bank. I couldn't see the exact amount, but it was enough to fill a briefcase. And get this, the man she met at the restaurant, I got his photo developed. Want to guess who he is? Surprise me. Thomas Eldridge, senior partner at Eldridge, Whitman and Associates, probably the most expensive criminal defense attorney in New York. Ellen Draycott is lawyering up Archie. She knows the walls are closing in. Does she know she's being followed? If she does, she's not showing it. She's careful, but not paranoid. I've been able to stay on her without much trouble. Keep watching. And if she tries to leave the country before tomorrow night, call me immediately. We may need to move fast. You got it. I hung up and thought about what Saul had told me. Ellen Draycott was preparing to run. That suggested guilt, but it also suggested desperation. She'd stolen $17 million, framed her partner, and possibly killed him. Now she was getting out before the law caught up with her. But why tomorrow night? Why not leave immediately? What was she waiting for? I needed more information. I needed to talk to Cynthia Lattimore. The Lattimore apartment was on 5th Avenue overlooking Central Park, the kind of address that appeared in real estate fantasies and society columns. The doorman was a dignified older gentleman who looked like he moonlighted as a butler for British royalty. Archie Goodwin. To see Mrs. Lattimore. She's expecting me. I wasn't sure if that was true, but confidence sells more lies than actual lying does. The doorman consulted a tablet. I don't see your name on the list, sir. That's because she forgot to add it. Call her. Tell her I'm investigating her husband's murder and I have information she needs to hear. He made the call, spoke quietly, then nodded. 14th floor. Mrs. Lattimore will meet you at the door. The elevator was the kind that had an operator, a uniformed man who pulled the brass gate closed and pressed buttons like he was conducting an orchestra. We ascended in silence, and when the gate opened on 14, Cynthia Lattimore was waiting. She'd changed since leaving the brownstone. Gone was the black designer suit. Now she wore jeans and a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost a month's rent. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and without the carefully applied makeup, she looked younger and more vulnerable, also more genuine. Though with women like her, you could never be entirely sure. Mr. Goodwin. Her voice was neutral, carefully controlled. I'm surprised you came. After the way I spoke to Mr. Wolfe this afternoon, I didn't think you'd want anything to do with me. I'm not here to discuss lawsuits, I said. I'm here to find out who killed your husband. If you want the same thing, we should talk. She hesitated, then stepped back. Come in. The apartment was everything you'd expect from a Fifth Avenue address. High ceilings, original moldings, windows that framed Central Park like artwork. But it felt empty somehow, more like a showroom than a home. The furniture was expensive but impersonal. The art on the walls was investment grade but without character. It was the kind of place that looked perfect in photographs and felt hollow in person. Can I get you something? Cynthia asked. Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be good, thanks. She disappeared into the kitchen, giving me time to look around. There were photographs on the mantel, wedding pictures showing a younger Cynthia and Bernard Lattimore on a beach somewhere tropical. Vacation photos from Europe, charity gala pictures where they posed with other wealthy couples, everyone smiling for the camera, everyone looking perfectly happy. But there was something off about the photos, something in the body language. Lattimore stood slightly apart from his wife, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Cynthia's hand on his arm looked more decorative than affectionate. These were photos staged for appearances, not captured moments of genuine joy. Cynthia returned with coffee in delicate china cups that probably cost more than my entire set of dishes. We sat in the living room, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, I shouldn't have come to the brownstone like that. With the lawyer threatening to sue, it was my attorney's idea. He said we needed to establish a paper trail in case Mr. Wolfe tried to claim he'd done everything possible to help Bernard. Did your husband tell you he was going to see Wolfe? Yes, he called me Wednesday morning, said he'd gotten death threats and was scared. He thought someone was trying to kill him because of the embezzlement investigation. He wanted Nero Wolfe to find out who before it was too late. And you didn't try to stop him? Didn't suggest he go to the police instead? She looked down at her coffee. Bernard didn't trust the police. He thought they'd arrest him the moment they started investigating. He needed a private detective, someone who could work quietly and find evidence to prove his innocence. Did he tell you what happened at the brownstone? He called me after he left. He was angry, hurt. He said Nero Wolfe turned him away because the case was boring. He said he'd been dismissed like he wasn't worth Wolfe's time. Her voice hardened. That's why I was so furious this afternoon. My husband asked for help, was rejected, and then died. How is that not Wolfe's fault? Because Wolfe isn't responsible for the actions of a murderer. Your husband was killed by someone with a gun, not by someone's refusal to investigate. But if Wolfe had helped, he might have, or he might not have. We don't know. What I do know is that your husband was killed between 5 and 5:30 on Wednesday afternoon, less than an hour after leaving the brownstone. Whoever did it knew his schedule, knew where he'd be, and was prepared to act fast. That suggests someone close to him, someone who knew his movements. Cynthia set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. You think I killed him? I think you're a suspect. You stand to inherit his estate, even with the embezzlement scandal. You were married for 3 years, but the marriage doesn't look particularly happy based on these photos, and you showed up at Nero Wolfe's office less than 24 hours after your husband's death, with a lawyer and threats of lawsuits. That's not typical grieving widow behavior. Her face flushed. How dare you? I dare because I'm trying to find the truth. Was your marriage happy, Mrs. Lattimore? She stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at Central Park. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. No, it wasn't happy. We married for the wrong reasons. I needed financial security. Bernard wanted a young, beautiful wife to take to parties and charity events. We had an arrangement, not a relationship. Were you planning to divorce? Eventually. But Bernard's scandal complicated things. If I'd left him now, people would say I was abandoning him when he needed me most. I would have looked terrible. So I stayed, for appearances. And now he's dead, and you inherit everything. Not everything. The embezzlement destroyed most of his liquid assets. The apartment is mortgaged. His investments are tied up in litigation. His life insurance policy has a clause excluding payment if he committed suicide or was involved in criminal activity. I'm not getting rich from his death, Mr. Goodwin. I'm getting a mess. Where were you Wednesday afternoon between 4:30 and 6? Here. Alone. I was supposed to meet a friend for drinks at 6, but I cancelled because Bernard called and said he needed to talk to me. He never showed up. The next thing I knew, the police were at my door telling me he was dead. Can anyone confirm you were here? The doorman saw me come in around 4, but I didn't leave again until the police arrived at 7. So no, I don't have an alibi for the time of death. I made notes. No alibi, financial motive, unhappy marriage. She could have done it, but something didn't fit. Mrs. Lattimore, did your husband ever mention Ellen Draycott as a suspect in the embezzlement? Her expression changed, anger flashing across her face. Ellen. Of course, Bernard suspected her for weeks. He said she was the only one with enough access to pull off something this sophisticated. But he couldn't prove it, and she was too smart to leave obvious evidence. Did he confront her? Not directly. He was planning to, but he wanted to gather evidence first. He hired a forensic accountant to trace the missing funds, someone independent of the firm. The accountant was supposed to deliver preliminary findings on Thursday, today, but Bernard died before he could see them. That was new information. Who's the accountant? Gerald Hutchins. He has an office downtown. Bernard paid him out of pocket, kept it completely confidential. Ellen doesn't know about him. I wrote down the name. I need to talk to him. I have his card somewhere. She went to a desk in the corner, rummaged through papers, and came back with a business card. Here, tell him I sent you. And Mr. Goodwin. Yes? I didn't kill my husband. I know it looks bad. The unhappy marriage, the inheritance, the lack of alibi. But I didn't kill him. I'm not that kind of person. And despite everything, Bernard didn't deserve to die like that. He was trying to do the right thing, trying to prove his innocence. Someone murdered him to keep him quiet. Find out who. I stood up. I intend to. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Lattimore. She walked me to the door. As I was leaving, she said, Mr. Goodwin, when you see Nero Wolfe again, tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I know it's not his fault. The lawsuit was my lawyer's idea, not mine. I needed someone to blame, and he was convenient. I'll tell him, I said. The elevator ride down gave me time to think. Cynthia Lattimore was either genuinely devastated and confused, or she was an excellent actress. The unhappy marriage was real, that much I believed. But did that make her a killer? The doorman called me a cab, and I gave the driver Gerald Hutchins's address downtown. It was nearly 5 o'clock, but accountants kept long hours during busy season, and I was betting Hutchins was the type who worked late. I was right. His office was in a brownstone in the village, converted into professional suites. The sign outside listed Hutchins and Associates, forensic accounting. I climbed to the second floor and found his door unlocked, light spilling from inside. I knocked and walked in. The office was cramped, filled with filing cabinets and boxes of documents. A man in his 60s sat at a desk covered with spreadsheets and ledgers, glasses perched on his nose, calculator in hand. He looked up when I entered. Mr. Hutchins, I'm Archie Goodwin. Cynthia Lattimore sent me. I'm investigating Bernard Lattimore's murder. Hutchins set down his calculator. I heard about Bernard. Terrible thing. I've been working on his case for the past 3 weeks. He hired me to trace the embezzlement, find out who was stealing from his fund. Did you find anything? Oh yes, I found quite a bit. He pulled out a thick folder. Ellen Draycott is your embezzler, no question. She used Bernard's credentials to authorize fraudulent transfers, created shell companies in the Caymans, and moved money through a series of accounts designed to obscure the trail. Very sophisticated operation. She's been at it for at least 20 months, possibly longer. Can you prove it? Absolutely. I have transaction records, IP logs, bank statements, incorporation documents. Everything you need to prove Ellen Draycott stole $17.3 million from Lattimore Capital. Did you tell Bernard this? I was supposed to meet with him Thursday morning this morning to deliver my final report, but obviously that meeting didn't happen. When I heard he'd been murdered, I called Mrs. Lattimore to see if she wanted me to continue. She said yes, and to cooperate fully with any investigators. I leaned forward. Mr. Hutchins, did anyone else know you were working on this case? No. Bernard insisted on complete confidentiality. He didn't even tell his own staff. He paid me in cash, met me outside the office. He was very careful. But someone might have found out. Hutchins hesitated. It's possible. I had to access some of the firm's records through their online portal. If Ellen Draycott was monitoring access logs, she might have noticed unusual activity. She might have figured out someone was investigating her. And if she did, then she'd know her time was running out. She'd know that Bernard was close to proving she was the embezzler, and she'd have strong motivation to silence him before he could present the evidence. That was the missing piece. That was why Ellen killed Lattimore so quickly. She knew he was gathering evidence, knew time was running out, knew she had to act before he could prove her guilt. His visit to Nero Wolfe was the final straw. If he hired a famous detective, the investigation would accelerate. She had to kill him immediately, before Wolfe got involved. But she was too late. Wolfe was already involved, and now the net was closing. Mr. Hutchins, I need a copy of your report, all your evidence. Can you provide that? Certainly. I have copies ready. He handed me the thick folder. Everything's in there. Give it to the police, to Nero Wolfe, to whoever can stop Ellen Draycott. Bernard was a good man. He deserves justice. I took the folder and thanked him. Outside, the evening air was cool, the streetlights just coming on. I hailed a cab back to the brownstone, the folder heavy on my lap, Hutchins's words echoing in my mind. Bernard was a good man. He deserves justice. Yeah, he did. I got back to the brownstone at 6:15. Caesar met me at the door, tail wagging, which meant everything was secure. The other dogs were in various positions around the house. Mars by the back door, Apollo near the stairs, Minerva and Diana patrolling the upper floors. The fortress was intact. I found Wolfe in the dining room, just starting dinner. Fritz had outdone himself. The coq au vin smelled magnificent, rich with wine and herbs, and perfectly braised chicken. My stomach reminded me I'd skipped lunch. "Ah, Archie," Wolfe said without looking up from his plate. "You're late. Fritz kept your portion warm. Sit down and eat. You can report afterward." I didn't argue. Fritz brought my plate, and for the next 20 minutes, the only sounds were silverware on china and the occasional satisfied grunt from Wolfe. When we finished, Fritz cleared the plates and brought coffee. Only then did Wolfe look at me. "Now, what did you learn?" I gave him the full report, Raymond Keller's alibi and bitter disappointment, Cynthia Lattimore's unhappy marriage and lack of alibi, Gerald Hutchins's forensic evidence against Ellen Draycott, and Saul's news about Ellen's plans to flee to Switzerland. I also handed over Hutchins's folder and Philip Renshaw's flash drive. Wolfe examined both carefully, reading through the documents with the concentration of a man solving a complex puzzle. Finally, he set them down and reached for his beer. "This is comprehensive," he said. "With this evidence, the police can arrest Ellen Draycott for embezzlement and build a strong circumstantial case for murder. Motive: she stole $17 million and needed to silence the one man who could prove it. Means: a .38 revolver, easily obtained. Opportunity: she knew Lattimore's schedule, knew he'd be vulnerable after leaving here, and now she's planning to flee the country with a briefcase full of cash and a one-way ticket to Switzerland. That's consciousness of guilt. So we turn everything over to Kramer and let him make the arrest." Wolfe was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming on the desk in that thinking rhythm. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because something is still wrong. The evidence against Ellen Draycott is overwhelming, almost too overwhelming. The digital logs, the forensic accounting, the flight to Switzerland. It's all very convenient, very tight." "You think she's being framed?" "I think it's possible. Consider. Ellen Draycott is a sophisticated financial criminal. She stole $17 million over 20 months using careful planning and technical expertise. Such a person does not leave such an obvious trail of evidence. She does not hire a famous criminal defense attorney and then book a one-way flight to Switzerland the next day. She does not make mistakes. Unless she's panicking, I suggested. Unless Bernard's death didn't go as planned, and now she's scrambling. Perhaps, but I don't like convenient explanations. They're usually wrong. He stood up with effort. Tomorrow morning, I want you to visit Ellen Draycott directly. Confront her with what we know. See how she reacts. If she's guilty, she'll either break down or lawyer up. If she's being framed, she'll want to defend herself. Either way, we'll learn something. And if she tries to run? Saul is watching her. She won't get far. But Archie, be careful. If Ellen Draycott is a murderer, confronting her could be dangerous. Take precautions. I always do, I said. But as I headed upstairs to my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that Wolfe was right. Something about this case didn't fit. The evidence was too perfect, the trail too clear. And in my experience, when something looks too good to be true, it usually is. The question was, what were we missing? I slept poorly that night, which was unusual for me. Normally I could sleep through anything. Thunderstorms, sirens, even Wolfe's 3 in the morning trips to check on a sick orchid. But Thursday night, I kept waking up, pieces of the case tumbling through my mind like clothes in a dryer. Ellen Draycott's IP address in Lattimore's account, the death threat letters, the compressed timeline of the murder, Cynthia Lattimore's unhappy marriage, Raymond Keller's bitter disappointment, the man in the grey overcoat following Margaret Ashford. And underneath it all, Wolfe's words, the evidence is too perfect, the trail too clear. At 6:30 Friday morning, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Fritz was already in the kitchen, preparing Wolfe's breakfast tray, the one meal of the day Wolfe ate in his room before heading to the plant rooms at 9. The smell of coffee and freshly baked croissants filled the brownstone like a benediction. Early morning, Archie, Fritz observed, pouring me coffee without being asked. Good man, Fritz. You are troubled. Just thinking about the case. Something doesn't add up, but I can't figure out what. Mr. Wolfe was awake late last night. I heard him pacing in his room at 2 o'clock. He is also troubled. That was significant. Wolfe paced when he was working through something difficult, when all the pieces were there but the pattern hadn't emerged yet. It meant we were close to something, but not close enough. I took my coffee to the office and started going through the evidence again. Philip Renshaw's flash drive with the digital logs, Gerald Hutchins's forensic report, my own notes from the interviews. Everything pointed to Ellen Draycott as the embezzler, and by extension, the murderer. But Wolfe was right. It was too neat, too convenient, like someone had laid out a trail of breadcrumbs designed to lead us straight to Ellen's door. At 8:30 the phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie, it's Saul. You need to hear this. I'm listening. Ellen Draycott didn't go home last night. She worked late at the office, left around 10, and instead of going to her apartment, she went to a warehouse in Red Hook, industrial area, mostly empty at night. She met someone there. Who? Couldn't get close enough to see clearly without being spotted. But it was a man, middle-aged, and they argued. Heated argument, lots of pointing, raised voices. It went on for about 20 minutes. Then the man handed her something, looked like a package or envelope, and left. Ellen stayed at the warehouse for another hour, then drove to a motel in Queens. She's still there. A motel. Not her apartment or a hotel. Cheap motel, the kind that rents by the hour and doesn't ask questions. She paid cash, used a fake name. She's hiding, Archie, and she's scared. That changed things. If Ellen was hiding, that suggested either guilt or fear or both. Stay on her. I need to know if she moves, who she contacts, everything. Already on it. But Archie, there's something else. That warehouse where she met the mystery man. I went back this morning to look around. Found something interesting. What? Blood. Not much. Just a few drops on the concrete floor, near where Ellen was standing. Fresh blood. Maybe a day or two old. My stomach tightened. Bernard Lattimore's blood? Can't say for sure without testing it. But the timing fits. Lattimore was killed Wednesday evening. Ellen was at that warehouse last night, standing near bloodstains. Draw your own conclusions. Get photos of the warehouse and the bloodstains and see if you can find out who owns the property. If Ellen has a connection to that location, it could be the murder site. Already working on it. I'll have answers by noon. He hung up. I sat there for a moment thinking. A warehouse in Red Hook. Bloodstains. A mysterious meeting. Ellen hiding in a cheap motel. The case was cracking open, but not in the direction I'd expected. At 9 o'clock, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms. He looked tired, which for him meant there were faint shadows under his eyes, and his movements were slightly less deliberate than usual. He settled into his chair, rang for beer, and looked at me. "You have news. I can see it in your face." I told him about Saul's call, the warehouse, the bloodstains, the mystery man, Ellen's decision to hide. Wolfe listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was silent for a full minute. Finally, "The warehouse is the murder site. It must be. Lattimore left here at 4:35 on Wednesday. He was killed between 5 and 5:30. The East River is minutes from Red Hook. If Ellen lured him to that warehouse, shot him there, and disposed of the body immediately, the timeline works. But why meet someone there last night? Why return to the scene of the crime? Because something went wrong, or because she needed something she'd left behind, or," he paused, frowning, "or because she's not the killer, and she's being blackmailed by whoever is." That stopped me. Blackmailed? Consider the scenario. Ellen Draycott embezzles $17 million over 20 months. She's careful, sophisticated, successful. Then Bernard Lattimore hires a forensic accountant and starts gathering evidence. Ellen realizes she's about to be exposed. She panics, but not enough to commit murder. She's a thief, not a killer. So who killed Lattimore? Someone who knew about Ellen's embezzlement and saw an opportunity. This person killed Lattimore at the warehouse, made sure evidence pointed to Ellen, and is now using that knowledge to blackmail her. The meeting last night was a payoff, Ellen giving money to her blackmailer in exchange for silence. I thought about it. That would explain why she's hiding. She's not running from the police. She's running from the blackmailer. She knows if she stays in plain sight, she's vulnerable. Precisely. And the bloodstains at the warehouse are deliberate. The blackmailer wants evidence that Ellen was at the murder scene, either to control her or to frame her completely if she doesn't cooperate. But who's the blackmailer? Who knew about the embezzlement and had access to Lattimore's schedule? Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed. The letters, the death threat letters, they're the key. The scheme ends, or you do. That wasn't a threat from an angry investor or a vengeful partner. That was a blackmailer's ultimatum. Stop the embezzlement, or I'll expose you, and if you're exposed, you'll be killed to prevent you from talking. So the blackmailer sent the letters. No. The blackmailer killed Lattimore and made it look like the letters' threat had come true. The letters were theatrical misdirection, designed to make the murder seem inevitable. But they also reveal something important. The writer knew about the embezzlement, knew Lattimore was investigating, and knew enough about both Ellen and Bernard to manipulate them. I pulled out my notebook and started making a list. Who fits that profile? Who knew about both the embezzlement and Lattimore's investigation? Margaret Ashford knew about Ellen's access to Lattimore's accounts. Josephine Kern knew about the audit findings. Philip Renshaw knew about the digital logs. Gerald Hutchins knew everything. He was investigating the entire scheme. Cynthia Lattimore knew her husband suspected Ellen. Any of them could be the blackmailer. What about the man in the grey overcoat who followed Margaret Ashford? Could he be the blackmailer's hired muscle? Possibly. Or he could be working for Ellen herself. If she's being blackmailed, she might have hired protection. But that doesn't help us identify the blackmailer. Wolfe opened his eyes and reached for his beer. "Archie, I want you to do something risky. I want you to go to that motel in Queens and talk to Ellen Draycott. Tell her we know about the embezzlement, we know about the warehouse, and we know she's being blackmailed. Offer her protection in exchange for the truth. If she's guilty of murder, she'll refuse and try to run. If she's being framed, she'll talk. And if she's the killer and she shoots me in that motel room, then I'll be very annoyed, but I don't think she will. Ellen Draycott is desperate. But desperation makes people talk more than it makes them kill. Take precautions, but go." I didn't love the idea, but Wolfe was usually right about these things. "What about you? What will you be doing while I'm risking my neck? Thinking, and making some telephone calls. I need to verify a few theories. And Archie, when you return, bring Ellen Draycott with you if possible. I want to question her here, in controlled circumstances. If she's truly being blackmailed, she'll want our protection. Use that. Controlled circumstances, meaning the brownstone with 5 Dobermans, among other things. Now go, and be careful. The motel in Queens was exactly as depressing as you'd expect. A 2-story strip of rooms with peeling paint, a flickering neon sign that said vacancy in letters missing the C, and a parking lot that looked like the setting for every bad decision ever made. I parked my car 3 spaces down from the office and checked the address Saul had given me. Room 107, ground floor, around the back. I found it easily enough. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a thin line of light underneath the door. Someone was inside. I knocked. 3 quick raps. "Housekeeping," I called out in a high voice that probably wouldn't fool anyone, but was worth a try. Silence. Then footsteps. Then Ellen Draycott's voice, tight and scared. "Go away. I don't need housekeeping." "Miss Draycott, it's Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. I need to talk to you. It's important." More silence. Then, "How did you find me?" "We've been watching you. We know about the warehouse in Red Hook. We know about the meeting last night. And we know you're in trouble. Let me in and we'll talk. Or don't and I'll leave. But if you want help, this is your chance." The door opened a crack. Chain still attached. Through the gap, I could see Ellen Draycott's face, pale, exhausted. Her eyes red from crying, or lack of sleep, or both. She looked nothing like the confident, angry woman who'd stormed into Wolfe's office 3 days ago. "You're working with the police," she said. "No, I'm working for Nero Wolfe. We want to find out who killed Bernard Lattimore. If that's you, then you're in trouble. If it's not, then we can help." "Why would you help me?" "Because we're not convinced you're the killer. We think you're being blackmailed. And if that's true, we can protect you, but only if you tell us the truth." She studied my face for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she closed the door. I heard the chain rattle, and the door opened fully. The motel room was a study in despair. Unmade bed, clothes scattered on the floor, empty coffee cups on every surface, and Ellen Draycott standing in the middle of it all like a woman who'd lost everything. She was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, wrinkled and stained. Her hair was tangled. Her hands shook. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to the room's only chair. "I'll stand. I haven't been able to sit still since Wednesday." I sat. "Tell me about the embezzlement." She laughed, a bitter sound. "Straight to it then, no small talk, no pretense." "All right, yes. I embezzled from Lattimore Capital, $17.3 million over 20 months. I used Bernard's credentials, created shell companies, moved money through offshore accounts. I did it carefully, cleverly. I thought I was untraceable." "Why?" "Because Bernard was driving the company into the ground with his conservative strategies. We were losing clients, losing returns, losing relevance. I wanted to grow the fund, take bigger risks, make real money, but Bernard wouldn't listen, so I took matters into my own hands." "You stole from your own company?" "I borrowed from it. I was planning to put it all back once my investments paid off. But then the audit happened, and everything fell apart." "When did you realize you'd been caught?" 3 weeks ago, when the audit results came in. At first I thought I could contain it, make it look like Bernard's fault. I had enough evidence to frame him, his credentials, his digital signatures. But then he started investigating. He hired a forensic accountant. He started asking questions, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he proved I was the embezzler." "So you killed him?" "No." The word came out sharp and desperate. "I didn't kill him. I thought about it. God help me. I thought about it. But I couldn't do it. I'm not a murderer, Mr. Goodwin. I'm a thief, yes. A fraudster, yes. But not a killer." "Then who killed him?" She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands covering her face. "I don't know. But whoever it was, they're setting me up. They killed Bernard in that warehouse, left evidence to connect me to the scene, and now they're blackmailing me. They know I embezzled the money. They know I had motive to kill Bernard, and they're using that to control me." "Who's blackmailing you?" "I don't know their name, I've never seen their face clearly. They contacted me Thursday morning, the day after Bernard died. A phone call, voice disguised. They said they knew I killed Bernard, said they had evidence, said they'd go to the police unless I paid them. $200,000 in cash, delivered last night at the warehouse.
Did you pay?
Yes. I withdrew the money from my personal accounts, took it to the warehouse like they demanded. A man met me there, middle-aged, average height, wearing a ski mask. He took the money and left. That's when I noticed the bloodstains on the floor. That's when I realized the warehouse was where Bernard died. And that's when I knew I was being framed. Why didn't you go to the police? Because I'm guilty. I embezzled $17 million. If I go to the police, they'll arrest me immediately. And with Bernard's murder hanging over my head, they'll charge me with that too. The blackmailer will provide evidence. The police will build their case, and I'll spend the rest of my life in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. But all I saw was fear and exhaustion and genuine desperation. Either she was telling the truth, or she was the best actress I'd ever met. Miss Draycott, I need you to come with me to Nero Wolfe's brownstone. We can protect you there, and Mr. Wolfe can help you figure out who's framing you. But you need to tell us everything. The embezzlement, the blackmail, everyone who knew about the scheme, everything. If I go with you, the blackmailer will know. They're watching me. They'll know I talk to you. Then let them know. Let them realize you're not alone anymore, that you have protection. Blackmailers thrive on isolation and fear. Take those away, and they lose their power. She was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, she nodded. All right, I'll come with you. But Mr. Goodwin, you need to understand, whoever killed Bernard is smart, ruthless, and they know everything about the fund, the embezzlement, and everyone involved. They're not going to stop with blackmail. If they feel threatened, they'll kill again. Then we'd better find them fast, I said. We left the motel at 11:30. I drove, and Ellen sat in the passenger seat, constantly looking over her shoulder, jumping at every car that pulled too close. The fear was real. Whatever she'd done, whoever she was, right now Ellen Draycott was a woman, running for her life. We made it back to the brownstone without incident. Caesar met us at the door, and for the first time since I'd met her, Ellen Draycott smiled, a small, tired smile, but genuine. My father had Dobermans, she said quietly. When I was a girl, they were the only things that made me feel safe. These 5 will keep you safe, I promised. Nobody gets into this house without Wolfe's permission. Not the police, not your blackmailer, not anyone. We went to the office. Wolfe was at his desk with beer and a book, but he set both aside when we entered. He studied Ellen for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Miss Draycott, please sit. Archie has explained your situation. He said, you might be able to help me. Ellen sat in the red leather chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I don't know if that's true, but I'm out of options. Then we'll make it true. Wolfe leaned forward. I have spent the morning making telephone calls and verifying facts. I now know who killed Bernard Lattimore, who's blackmailing you, and how the entire scheme was orchestrated. But before I explain, I need you to answer one question honestly. The embezzlement, did you act alone, or did you have help? Ellen hesitated. I had help. Someone inside the company. Someone with technical expertise who could bypass the security protocols and create the false trails. But I'm not giving you their name unless you guarantee protection. That someone, Wolfe said quietly, is Philip Renshaw, your IT director, and he's not just your accomplice in embezzlement. He's also the man who killed Bernard Lattimore and is now blackmailing you. Ellen's face went white. What? No, Philip wouldn't. He couldn't. He could, and he did. And if you come clean now, if you testify against him, the district attorney might be inclined toward leniency on the embezzlement charges. But if you protect him, you'll go down for both the theft and the murder. Choose wisely, Miss Draycott. Ellen stared at Wolfe, then at me, then back at Wolfe. Her hands were shaking. Her face was pale, and in that moment I saw her make the calculation. Protect her accomplice or save herself. She chose survival. All right, she said quietly. I'll tell you everything. And she did. Ellen Draycott's confession took 45 minutes, and by the end of it, Fritz had brought coffee 3 times and Wolfe had gone through 2 bottles of beer. I filled 6 pages in my notebook, writing fast to keep up with the details. The embezzlement had started 22 months ago, Ellen explained. She'd approached Philip Renshaw with a proposition, help her siphon money from the fund, and she'd split the proceeds 50-50. Renshaw, underpaid and underappreciated despite his technical expertise, had agreed. Together they'd created an elaborate system of shell companies, false accounts and digital breadcrumbs that all pointed to Bernard Lattimore. It was perfect, Ellen said, her voice hollow. Bernard trusted me completely. He gave me access to everything, and Philip made sure the digital trail was untraceable. Or so we thought. We moved small amounts at first, testing the system, then larger sums. By the time anyone noticed, we'd taken over $17 million. Where's the money now? I asked. Offshore accounts in the Caymans. Philip set them up using shell corporations registered in Belize. The accounts are under false names, impossible to trace unless you know exactly where to look. And you were planning to flee to Switzerland with your share? Yes. Once the scandal broke, I knew I had to get out. The plan was to transfer my money to Swiss accounts, establish residency, and disappear. Philip was supposed to do the same. Separate flights, separate destinations, no contact until we were both safely away. Wolfe shifted in his chair. But Bernard Lattimore complicated matters by hiring a forensic accountant. Gerald Hutchins was closing in on the truth. We didn't know about Hutchins until it was too late. Bernard was so secretive about it. But Philip noticed unusual access patterns in our system, someone querying records, pulling transaction logs. He traced it back to Hutchins and realized Bernard was building a case against us. So you panicked, I said. Philip panicked. He said, we needed to accelerate our timeline, get out immediately before Hutchins could finish his report. But I told him to wait, to be patient. We'd already waited 22 months. What was another few weeks? If we ran too soon, it would look suspicious. That's when Philip decided to kill Lattimore. Wolfe said. It wasn't a question. Ellen nodded slowly. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know what he was planning. Philip told me he'd handle the Bernard problem, but I thought he meant we'd frame Bernard more thoroughly, make sure all evidence pointed to him instead of us. I never imagined he meant murder. When did you learn the truth? Thursday morning, the day after Bernard died. Philip called me, said everything had gone perfectly, said Bernard wouldn't be a problem anymore. At first I didn't understand what he meant. Then he told me he'd lured Bernard to the Red Hook warehouse and shot him, just like that, cold-blooded murder. And you didn't go to the police? I asked. How could I? I was guilty of embezzlement. If I reported Philip, he'd take me down with him. He'd tell the police I ordered the hit, that I was the mastermind, my word against his, and I had the clearer motive, so I said nothing. I pretended everything was fine. And then Thursday night, Philip called again. The blackmail, Wolfe said. Yes. He said the situation had changed. He said Bernard's murder was my fault, that I'd forced his hand by being too cautious. He said if I wanted to avoid a murder charge, I'd need to pay him. $200,000 immediately, and more later. He'd become my partner in crime and my blackmailer simultaneously. Why didn't you tell him to go to hell? I asked. He's just as guilty as you are. Because Philip's smart, he covered his tracks. The warehouse is registered to one of my shell companies, the one I created for the embezzlement. My digital signature authorized the lease. If the police investigate, they'll find my name all over it. And Philip made sure to leave evidence at the scene. My hair, my fingerprints, blood that I'm sure will match Bernard's. He set it up so that if he gets caught, I go down too. But if I play along, pay him what he wants, maybe we both get away clean. Wolfe shook his head slowly. Miss Draycott, you're an intelligent woman. Surely you realize that paying a blackmailer never works. They always come back for more, and eventually they eliminate you to protect themselves. I know that now. But on Thursday, I was terrified. I paid him the $200,000, and then I ran. I checked into that motel, turned off my phone, tried to figure out what to do next. That's when Mr. Goodwin found me. I looked at Wolfe. So Philip Renshaw is our killer. He embezzled with Ellen, killed Lattimore to cover his tracks, and is now blackmailing his accomplice. Where is he now? An excellent question. Wolfe reached for the telephone and dialed a number from memory. Inspector Kramer, please. Tell him it's Nero Wolfe, and it's urgent. While we waited for Kramer to come on the line, Ellen asked quietly, "What happens to me now?" "That depends," Wolfe said. "If you testify against Renshaw, if you provide full disclosure about the embezzlement and his role in Lattimore's murder, the district attorney may offer a deal. You'll serve time for the theft, certainly, but you might avoid a murder charge. And if I don't testify, then you'll be charged as an accessory to murder, possibly as the primary suspect. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. The choice, as I said before, is yours." Kramer came on the line before Ellen could respond. Wolfe explained the situation in his usual economical manner. Ellen Draycott had confessed to embezzlement. Philip Renshaw was the killer and blackmailer, and we needed police protection for Ellen while they arrested Renshaw. I couldn't hear Kramer's response, but from Wolfe's expression, it wasn't polite. "Inspector, I don't care about your reservations. The woman is here, in my office, prepared to give a full statement. Send Sergeant Stebbins with a stenographer and send a team to arrest Philip Renshaw. The address is, Archie, where does Renshaw live?" I'd gotten that information from Josephine Kern 2 days ago. I rattled off the address, an apartment in Murray Hill. Wolfe relayed it to Kramer, listened for a moment, then said, "Fine, we'll expect Stebbins within the hour. And Inspector, be careful with Renshaw. He's killed once already. He won't hesitate to do it again if cornered." He hung up and looked at Ellen. "The police are coming. You'll give them your full statement, including details about the embezzlement, the warehouse, and Renshaw's threats. In exchange, they'll offer protection and likely a deal from the district attorney. Do you understand?" "Yes," Ellen said quietly. "I understand." "Good. Now while we wait, I have questions. The death threat letters that Lattimore received, did Renshaw send those?" "I don't know. Bernard showed them to me, asked if I knew anything about them. I said no, which was true, but Philip might have sent them. He's theatrical enough for that kind of thing." "The man in the grey overcoat who followed Margaret Ashford, was that Renshaw?" "I don't think so. Philip's not the physical type. If he needed surveillance work done, he'd hire someone, but I don't know who." Wolfe frowned. "Then there are still loose ends, the death threat letters, the surveillance, the precise timing of the murder. Something doesn't fit." Before he could elaborate, the telephone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. "Goodwin?" It was Saul Panzer, and his voice was tight. "We've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Philip Renshaw's apartment. I came by to keep an eye on the place before the police arrived, like you asked. But Goodwin, there's been a fire. The whole building's cordoned off, fire trucks everywhere. The super says Renshaw's apartment was the origin point, and they found a body inside." My stomach dropped. "Renshaw? They're saying male, approximately the right age and build, but the body's badly burned. They'll need dental records to confirm identity." "Goodwin, if that's Renshaw, and he's dead, then who the hell did Ellen Draycott pay $200,000 to last night?" I looked at Wolfe. His face had gone very still. "Saul, stay there. Document everything. Talk to the fire marshal. Find out if it was arson, and find out exactly when the fire started." "Already on it. But Archie, if Renshaw's been dead since Wednesday or Thursday, then everything Ellen just told you is wrong. The blackmail, the warehouse meeting, all of it. Someone else is pulling the strings." I hung up slowly and relayed Saul's information. Ellen Draycott's face had gone from pale to ashen. "That's impossible," she said. "I talked to Philip on Thursday. After Bernard died, he told me he killed him." "You talked to someone," Wolfe said, "but perhaps not Philip Renshaw. Was it a voice you recognized, or a voice that was disguised?" She thought back. I thought it was Philip, but the connection was bad, lots of static, and he was talking fast, urgently. I assumed it was him because who else would know about the embezzlement, about Bernard's death, about everything? "Who else indeed?" Wolfe murmured. He stood up and began pacing. 3 steps one direction, 3 steps back. It was his thinking pace, the one that meant pieces were falling into place but not fast enough. "Archie, call Saul back. I need to know the exact time of Renshaw's death, if the fire marshal can determine it." I made the call. Saul was still at the scene, talking to officials. He came back on the line 5 minutes later. "Fire marshal says the body's been there at least 24 hours, maybe longer. The fire was set deliberately, accelerant used, multiple ignition points. Whoever did this wanted to destroy evidence, but they left one thing, a wallet, partially melted but still identifiable. Philip Renshaw's wallet, with his ID and credit cards. So Renshaw was killed Wednesday or Thursday, and his apartment was torched to hide the evidence. I said, that means the person Ellen paid last night wasn't Renshaw. It was someone impersonating him. Someone who knew about the embezzlement, Wolfe said. Someone who knew about the warehouse. Someone who had access to Renshaw's phone and could impersonate his voice. Someone who killed both Lattimore and Renshaw and is now playing a much larger game. Ellen stood up, her hands shaking. Mr. Wolfe, who is it? Who's doing this? Someone who's been 2 steps ahead of us from the beginning. Someone who saw an opportunity in your embezzlement scheme and decided to exploit it for their own ends. Someone who... The telephone rang again. I grabbed it, expecting Saul or Kramer. Instead, I heard a voice I didn't recognize, male, calm, with a faint accent I couldn't place. Mr. Goodwin, I have a message for Nero Wolfe. Tell him the game is almost over. Tell him if he wants to save the next victim, he'll need to move very fast. And tell him the clock is ticking. Who is this? He'll figure it out. That's what he does, isn't it? Solve impossible puzzles. Well, here's his puzzle. The embezzler is in his office, the accomplice is dead, the blackmailer is a ghost, and the next victim is already marked. Good luck, Mr. Wolfe. You're going to need it. The line went dead. I hung up slowly and looked at Wolfe. We've got a problem. I gathered. What did he say? I repeated the message verbatim. Wolfe listened, his expression growing darker with each word. When I finished, he said quietly, "Then we're out of time. Whoever this is, they're accelerating their plan. The next victim is already marked." Who's the next victim? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. Archie, call Kramer again. Tell him to put protection on Josephine Kern, Margaret Ashford, Gerald Hutchins, and Cynthia Lattimore. All of them are potential targets. You think the killer's going after everyone connected to the case? I think the killer has a specific endgame in mind, and that endgame requires eliminating anyone who might expose them. We need to identify their motive, their method, and their next move, and we need to do it quickly, before someone else dies. Fritz appeared at the office door, his face troubled. Mr. Wolfe, excuse the interruption, but there's someone at the front door, a woman. She says her name is Josephine Kern, and she needs to speak with you immediately. She says it's life or death. Wolfe and I exchanged glances. Show her in, Wolfe said, and Fritz, keep the dogs close. If anyone else tries to enter, stop them. Of course, sir. Fritz disappeared. A moment later, Josephine Kern entered the office. She looked terrified, her hair disheveled, her coat buttoned wrong, her eyes wild with fear. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, thank God you're here. She saw Ellen Draycott and stopped. Ellen, what are you doing here? Saving my own life, Ellen said bitterly. What are you doing here? I got a phone call this morning. A man's voice disguised. He said he knew I'd been helping investigate the embezzlement. He said if I didn't pay him $50,000 by tonight, he'd kill me like he killed Bernard and Philip. He said I had until 5 o'clock. Wolfe leaned forward. This caller, what exactly did he say? His precise words, if you can remember them. Josephine closed her eyes, thinking. He said, "You know too much about Lattimore Capital. You've been asking questions, digging into records, helping investigators. That makes you a liability. Pay me $50,000 by 5 o'clock today, or you'll be the next body in the East River." Did he tell you how to deliver the money? Cash, in a briefcase, left at a specific location in Central Park. The Bethesda fountain at exactly 5 o'clock. Come alone, or the deal's off. I looked at my watch. It was 12:30, 4.5 hours. Wolfe drummed his fingers on the desk, his thinking rhythm accelerating. Miss Kern, this is a trap. Whoever's blackmailing you doesn't want money. They want to lure you to an isolated location and kill you. I know that, Josephine's voice broke. But what choice do I have? If I don't go, he'll come after me anyway. At least if I go, I have a chance to see his face, to identify him before he kills you. No, you're not going anywhere near Central Park. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, we need a plan. The killer expects Josephine Kern at the Bethesda fountain at 5 o'clock. We'll give him someone else instead. Who? You'll pose as Miss Kern, deliver the briefcase, and wait for the killer to show. Saul will provide backup, watching from concealment. When the killer approaches, we'll have him. And if he doesn't approach, if he just shoots me from a distance, then Saul will intervene before he can fire. But I don't think he will. The killer is theatrical, methodical. He wants to be close when he acts. He wants to see his victim's fear. That's comforting, I said dryly. Ellen spoke up. Mr. Wolfe, I still don't understand. Who is this person? How do they know so much about the embezzlement? About Bernard's investigation? About all of us? Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, because they've been watching from the beginning. They've been embedded in Lattimore capital, learning, planning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now that moment has come. Who? Ellen demanded. Who is it? I have a theory, Wolfe said, but I need proof, and I need the killer to reveal themselves, which is why Archie will go to Central Park this afternoon and spring the trap. I stood up. Then I'd better get ready. Saul's going to love this. One more thing, Archie. Wolfe's voice was grave. Be very careful. This killer has murdered 2 people already and is preparing to kill a 3rd. They're intelligent, ruthless, and apparently without conscience. Don't underestimate them. Never do, I said. But as I left the office to make preparations, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial, some piece of the puzzle that would make everything clear. And I had a bad feeling we'd only figure out what it was when the killer made their final move. Getting ready to impersonate Josephine Kern wasn't as complicated as you might think. Same height, roughly same build, similar coloring. I borrowed her coat, put on a hat pulled low, and carried a leather briefcase that Wolfe kept in his safe for emergencies. Inside the briefcase, $50,000 in cut newspaper wrapped to look like bills, covered with a thin layer of real hundreds. If the killer looked closely, he'd spot the fake, but we were betting he wouldn't look until it was too late. Saul Panzer arrived at 2 o'clock with surveillance equipment and a plan. We'd use Josephine's coat and accessories. I'd approach the Bethesda fountain from the south at exactly 5 o'clock, and Saul would be positioned in 3 different locations with backup from 2 operatives he trusted. If the killer showed, we'd have him surrounded. What if he doesn't show? Saul asked. Then we wait, I said. But Wolfe thinks he will. This killer's been orchestrating everything from the beginning. He won't miss his own performance. While Saul set up his surveillance positions, I stayed at the brownstone going over the details with Wolfe. Ellen Draycott and Josephine Kern were both sequestered in the guest room upstairs, under Fritz's watchful eye and the dog's protection. Kramer had sent Sergeant Stebbins over to take Ellen's formal statement, which took another hour, and resulted in Stebbins looking progressively more disgusted with each revelation. Embezzlement, murder, blackmail, arson, Stebbins muttered as he packed up his notes. This case has everything except a happy ending. We're working on that, I said. Any word on Philip Renshaw's body? Dental records confirm it's him. Time of death is tricky because of the fire, but the medical examiner thinks Wednesday evening, maybe as late as Thursday morning, which means he was already dead when Ellen Draycott got that blackmail call Thursday afternoon. So someone killed Renshaw, took his identity and used it to blackmail Ellen and extort money from Josephine Kern. That someone also killed Bernard Lattimore. We're looking at a double murder, maybe soon to be triple. Not if we stop them today. Stebbins stood up. Goodwin, be careful out there. These park operations can go sideways fast. Keep your head down and trust your backup. Always do. He left, taking Ellen's statement with him. The plan was for the police to issue a warrant for Philip Renshaw's killer, still unidentified, and to put surveillance on everyone connected to Lattimore Capital. But the real action would happen at 5 o'clock in Central Park. At 4:15, I put on Josephine's coat and hat, picked up the briefcase, and looked at myself in the front hall mirror. In dim light from a distance, I could pass for a woman. Up close, not so much. But we were betting the killer would approach from behind, see what he expected to see, and not look too carefully until it was too late. Wolfe called me into the office one more time before I left. He was at his desk with his afternoon beer, but his expression was troubled. Archie, I want you to understand something. This killer is not like the criminals we usually encounter. He's not motivated by greed or passion or revenge. He's motivated by something deeper, something more pathological. What do you mean? I mean, he's enjoying this. The complexity, the manipulation, the control. He's playing a game, and we're the pieces. That makes him dangerous in ways that ordinary criminals are not. You know who it is, don't you? Wolfe hesitated. I have a theory, but I need confirmation, and I need you to be very careful when you get that confirmation. If I'm right, this person will not surrender easily. They'll fight, and they'll fight dirty. Give me a name. Not yet. If I'm wrong, I don't want to prejudice your observations. Go to the park, spring the trap, and see who appears. Then we'll compare notes. I didn't love being kept in the dark, but Wolfe had his reasons. He always did. Any other advice? Yes. When the killer reveals themselves, don't try to be heroic. Saul and his team will handle the apprehension. Your job is to survive and observe, nothing more. I'll try to remember that when someone's shooting at me. See that you do. I've grown accustomed to your assistance, and I'd prefer not to train a replacement. Coming from Wolfe, that was practically a declaration of affection. I grinned. I'll do my best not to get killed. Excellent. Now go. And Archie, good luck. Central Park at 4:45 on a Friday afternoon in October was a study in contrasts. Tourists taking photos at Bethesda Terrace, joggers running their daily routes, street musicians playing for spare change, dog walkers, nannies with strollers, business people taking shortcuts through the park. Normal New York life, completely unaware that a killer was about to make his move. I approached the Bethesda fountain from the south, walking like a nervous woman with a briefcase full of money, head down, shoulders hunched, pace quick but not too quick. The fountain itself was magnificent as always, the angel of the waters statue presiding over the plaza like a bronze guardian. But today the beauty was lost on me. I was too busy scanning for threats. Saul had positioned himself near the terrace arcade, dressed as a homeless man with a shopping cart full of newspapers. From there he could see the entire plaza and respond to any trouble within seconds. His two backup operatives were disguised as tourists, one with a camera, one with a map. Between the three of them they had every angle covered. At exactly 5 o'clock, I reached the fountain. I set the briefcase down on the plaza's edge, like the blackmail note had instructed, and stepped back. Then I waited. 5 minutes passed. Nobody approached. 10 minutes. The crowd thinned as people headed home for dinner. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the plaza. 15 minutes. I was starting to think the killer wouldn't show. Then I heard a voice behind me, calm and cultured and faintly amused. Miss Kern, right on time. I admire punctuality. I turned slowly. The person standing there wasn't anyone I'd expected. It wasn't Ellen Draycott, or Cynthia Lattimore, or Raymond Keller. It was someone I'd met 2 days ago, someone who'd seemed helpful and cooperative, and completely innocent. Gerald Hutchins, the forensic accountant. He was holding a small revolver, pointed at my midsection, and he was smiling. Although now that I'm closer, I can see you're not Miss Kern at all. You're Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's assistant. Clever. I should have anticipated that Wolfe would send a substitute. He's always been clever. I kept my hands visible, non-threatening. Mr. Hutchins, I have to say, I didn't see this coming. No one did. That was rather the point. He gestured with the gun. Pick up the briefcase. Slowly. We're going to take a walk, you and I. If you try to signal your backup, I'll shoot you right here. Understood? Understood. I picked up the briefcase, moving carefully. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Saul shifting position in the arcade. He'd spotted Hutchins and the gun. Now he was calculating angles, distances, opportunities. Hutchins saw my glance and laughed. Your friend with the shopping cart is very good, but not good enough. I've been watching him for the past 20 minutes. He's too focused on the plaza, not enough on his peripherals. If he moves, I shoot you. If anyone else moves, I shoot you. So I suggest we all stay very calm and civilized. Where are we going? Somewhere private, somewhere we can talk. He backed away from the fountain, keeping the gun trained on me. Walk ahead of me, north toward the Ramble, and don't do anything stupid. I've already killed 2 people this week. A third won't trouble my conscience. I walked. The Ramble was Central Park's wild section, Overgrown paths, dense foliage, isolated clearings, a perfect place for a murder. But it was also far from the fountain, which gave Saul time to follow at a distance. As we walked, I said, "So you killed Lattimore and Renshaw?" "I did. Both necessary eliminations. Bernard was getting too close to the truth, and Philip was a loose end. Ellen Draycott was supposed to be the scapegoat, but she proved more resourceful than I anticipated. Going into hiding was smart. Hiring Nero Wolfe for protection was smarter. Why kill them at all? Why not just let the embezzlement play out?" "Because I needed the money." Hutchins's voice was matter-of-fact, almost bored. "I've been running a forensic accounting practice for 15 years, Mr. Goodwin. Do you know what that pays? Nothing. Barely enough to cover my overhead. Meanwhile, I watch criminals like Ellen Draycott and Philip Renshaw steal millions with sophisticated schemes, and I'm the one who has to untangle their messes for a pittance." "So you decided to take your cut?" "I decided to take all of it. When Bernard hired me to investigate the embezzlement, I saw an opportunity. I had access to all the evidence, all the accounts, all the passwords. I could see exactly where the money was and how to get it. So I made a plan. Kill Lattimore, frame Ellen, steal the embezzled money for yourself." "Exactly. Bernard's death made Ellen the obvious suspect. The police would investigate, arrest her, and while everyone was focused on the scandal, I'd quietly transfer the 17 million from the offshore accounts into my own. Then I'd disappear. New identity, new life set for the rest of my days." "But Philip Renshaw complicated things." "He did. I needed his passwords to access the Cayman accounts, and he wouldn't cooperate. He knew Ellen would eventually talk, and he wanted to secure his own money before she did. So I killed him, took his credentials, and impersonated him to blackmail Ellen. The 200,000 was a nice bonus, but the real prize was access to the offshore accounts. We'd reached the edge of the ramble. The path narrowed, surrounded by thick bushes and trees. Fewer people here, more isolation. Hutchins gestured with the gun. "Turn left. There's a clearing ahead." I turned left, my mind racing. Saul would be following, but at a distance. If Hutchins planned to kill me in the clearing, I'd need to buy time. "What about the death threat letters? Did you send those?" "I did. Theatrical, I know, but necessary. The letters established a pattern. Someone was threatening Bernard, so his eventual murder would look like a threat fulfilled. It also put him on edge, made him scared and paranoid. Scared people make mistakes." "And the warehouse in Red Hook?" "I leased it using one of Ellen's shell companies. Her digital signature, her money. When the police eventually trace it, they'll find her name all over the paperwork. The bloodstains I left at the scene are Bernard's. I made sure to collect enough when I shot him to plant evidence later. Very thorough, wouldn't you say?" "Very, but you made one mistake." "Oh, what's that?" "You underestimated Nero Wolfe." Hutchins laughed. "Did I?" "Mr. Goodwin, Nero Wolfe has no idea I'm the killer. He suspects Ellen, or perhaps Philip's ghost. He certainly doesn't suspect the helpful forensic accountant, who's been providing evidence and cooperating with the investigation. By the time he figures it out, I'll be in South America with $17 million and a new identity." "You're wrong about that," I said. "Wolfe figured you out hours ago. Why do you think he sent me instead of Josephine Kern? He knew you'd show up. He knew you'd reveal yourself. And he knew you'd try to kill again." For the first time, doubt flickered across Hutchins's face. "You're lying." "Am I? Then why is Saul Panzer following us right now? Why are there police watching every exit from the park? Why did Wolfe tell me this morning that the killer was someone embedded in Lattimore Capital, someone with access to everything, someone who'd been watching from the beginning?" "Wolfe said that?" "He said that." Hutchins stopped walking. We'd reached the clearing, a small open space surrounded by dense foliage, isolated and quiet, perfect for a murder or a trap. "It doesn't matter," Hutchins said, raising the gun. "Even if Wolfe suspects me, he can't prove anything. I've been too careful, and once you're dead, there's no witness to contradict my story. I'll claim you attacked me. I defended myself. Self-defense. Clean and simple. Except for one thing." "What's that?" I smiled. "I'm not alone." Saul Panzer stepped out of the bushes behind Hutchins, gun drawn. "Drop it, Hutchins. Nice and slow, you're surrounded." Hutchins spun, his gun swinging toward Saul. But before he could fire, one of Saul's operatives emerged from the opposite direction, also armed. Then the other operative appeared from a third angle. 3 guns on Hutchins, no escape route. "It's over," I said. "Drop the gun and we'll do this easy. Or don't, and we'll do it hard. Your choice." For a long moment, Hutchins stood there, weighing his options. I could see the calculation in his eyes. Could he shoot his way out? Could he take a hostage? Could he run? Then he slumped, the fight going out of him. The gun dropped from his hand and clattered on the ground. "Smart choice," Saul said, moving forward to retrieve the weapon. "Now turn around and put your hands behind your back." Hutchins complied, and Saul cuffed him efficiently. One of the operatives called the police, while the other secured the perimeter. I picked up the briefcase with the fake money and walked over to Hutchins. "One question before the police arrive. How did you know about the embezzlement in the first place? Before Lattimore hired you?" Hutchins looked at me with dead eyes. "I've been investigating Lattimore Capital for 6 months, Mr. Goodwin. Not for Bernard, for the SEC. They suspected fraud and hired me to gather evidence quietly. I found Ellen's scheme almost immediately, but instead of reporting it, I decided to profit from it. Why should the government get the money when I could take it for myself?" "Greed," I said, "the oldest motive in the book." "Not greed, justice. I've spent my entire career helping other people get rich while I stayed poor. This was my chance to even the scales, and I almost succeeded." "Almost doesn't count," I said. Kramer and his team arrived 10 minutes later, emerging from the park paths with the subtlety of a parade. He looked at Hutchins in handcuffs, looked at me standing there in Josephine Kern's coat, and shook his head. "Goodwin, I should have known this would turn into a circus. Who's this?" "Gerald Hutchins, forensic accountant. Also known as the man who killed Bernard Lattimore and Philip Renshaw, blackmailed Ellen Draycott, and tried to steal $17 million in embezzled funds. We've got him on attempted murder, conspiracy, and a really bad personality. He'll confess to everything if you ask nicely. He likes to talk." Kramer looked at Hutchins. "Is that true?" "I want a lawyer," Hutchins said. "Of course you do." Kramer signaled to his officers. "Take him downtown. Book him for murder 1, 2 counts. We'll add the other charges later." He turned to me. "How did Wolfe figure it out?" "You'll have to ask him yourself, but I think it had something to do with the evidence being too perfect, the trail too obvious. Wolfe doesn't trust convenient answers. He never does." Kramer pulled out a cigar and stuck it in his mouth, unlit. "All right, get back to the brownstone and tell Wolfe I'll be by tomorrow for his full statement. And Goodwin, tell him he was right. Again, I hate when he's right." "I'll be sure to mention that," I said. I got back to the brownstone at 7:30. Fritz met me at the door with relief written all over his face. "Archie, thank God. Mr. Wolfe has been pacing for the past hour. He's been impossible." "He's always impossible, but tell him we got our man." I went to the office. Wolfe was at his desk, dinner finished, a fresh beer open. He looked up when I entered, and for just a moment, I saw genuine relief in his eyes. "Hutchins confessed?" he asked. "More or less. He tried to shoot me first, but Saul convinced him that was a bad idea. Kramer has him in custody now, along with enough evidence to put him away for the rest of his life." "Excellent." Wolfe leaned back in his chair. I assume he explained his motive. "Greed. He'd been investigating Lattimore Capital for the SEC, found Ellen's embezzlement scheme, and decided to steal the money for himself. He killed Lattimore to stop the investigation, killed Renshaw to get the account passwords, and tried to kill Josephine Kern to eliminate witnesses. And the blackmail of Ellen Draycott. Pure opportunism. He needed access to the offshore accounts, and blackmail was the fastest way to get Ellen's cooperation. He impersonated Renshaw using information he'd gathered during the investigation." Wolfe nodded slowly. "It's as I suspected. The evidence against Ellen was too perfect, too comprehensive. Someone had gathered it all systematically, not as an embezzler covering their tracks, but as an investigator building a case. When I learned that Bernard had hired a forensic accountant, I realized that accountant would have access to everything. All the accounts, all the passwords, all the evidence. And with access comes temptation." "How did you know it was Hutchins specifically?" "Several factors. First, he provided evidence too readily when you met him. Genuinely cooperative witnesses are cautious about sharing information with private investigators. They worry about confidentiality, legal exposure, professional ethics. Hutchins had none of those concerns. He handed over his files without hesitation because he wanted us to focus on Ellen as the suspect. What else? What else? Second, his timeline was suspicious. He told you he was supposed to meet with Bernard Thursday morning to deliver his findings. But if that were true, why wasn't Bernard more optimistic on Wednesday? Why didn't he mention to us that proof of his innocence was coming the next day? Because there was no meeting scheduled. Hutchins invented it to explain why he had comprehensive evidence against Ellen. And third, and most damning, the warehouse in Red Hook. Hutchins told you it was leased using Ellen's shell company, with her digital signature. But how did he know that? The police hadn't released details about the murder scene. The warehouse wasn't mentioned in any public documents. The only way Hutchins could know about it was if he'd been there himself. I sat down and pulled off Josephine Kern's coat, glad to be rid of it. So you knew it was Hutchins when I went to Central Park? I strongly suspected, but I needed confirmation. I needed him to reveal himself, to confess in a way that couldn't be refuted. Sending you as bait was risky, but necessary. I'm glad it worked. Me too. Although for the record, I wasn't thrilled about being bait. You rarely are, yet you're surprisingly good at it. That's not the compliment you think it is. Wolfe smiled, a rare sight. Then his expression turned serious. What about Ellen Draycott? Will she face charges? Embezzlement, for certain. She'll serve time. But Stebbins said the DA might offer a deal in exchange for her testimony against Hutchins. She'll cooperate. She's smart enough to know it's her only option. And Josephine Kern? Shaken but unharmed. Fritz has her upstairs with tea and sympathy. She'll be fine once the shock wears off. Good. That concludes our involvement in this matter. Kramer can handle the cleanup. Wolfe reached for his book, the signal that the conversation was over. But before he opened it, he said, "Archie, you did well today. Thank you." Coming from Wolfe, that was high praise indeed. All in a day's work, I said, although I could do without being shot at for a while. I'll see what I can arrange, but I make no promises. Murder seems to find us, whether we seek it or not. Ain't that the truth? I said. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear, with a sharp wind that rattled the brownstone's windows and sent the last of autumn's leaves skittering down the street. I was up at 8, earlier than usual for a weekend, but my mind was still churning through the events of the past 4 days. Caesar met me at the bottom of the stairs, tail wagging, ready for his morning patrol with the pack. Through the window, I could see Mars and Apollo already checking the perimeter, while Minerva and Diana covered the rear approaches. Routine restored, order maintained. Fritz had breakfast waiting, scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh-baked rolls, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I was halfway through my second cup when Inspector Kramer called. "Goodwin, tell Wolfe I'm coming over at 10 o'clock. I've got questions, and I want answers while Hutchins's confession is still fresh." "I'll let him know." "Did Hutchins lawyer up?" "Oh, he lawyered up all right. Got himself Thomas Eldridge, same attorney Ellen Draycott was planning to use. But even Eldridge can't save him. We've got Hutchins on 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder of you, embezzlement, blackmail, arson, and about 6 other charges I'm still tallying. He's looking at life without parole, minimum." "Did he explain everything? The full scheme?" "He's not talking without his lawyer present, but we've got enough physical evidence to reconstruct it. The gun that killed Lattimore and Renshaw ballistics match, found hidden in Hutchins's office. The accelerant used in Renshaw's apartment fire, same type Hutchins had purchased 2 weeks ago under a false name. The offshore account passwords, written on a note in Hutchins' handwriting. He was meticulous about planning, but sloppy about cleanup. Classic narcissist. What about the 17 million? Still in the Cayman accounts. Ellen's given us access codes, and we're working with the Cayman authorities to freeze and repatriate the funds. Most of it should go back to Lattimore Capital's defrauded investors, minus legal fees and government penalties. Ellen won't see a dime. And Ellen herself. DA's offering her 8 to 12 on embezzlement charges in exchange for full cooperation. She'll be eligible for parole in 6 if she behaves. Could be worse. She could be facing murder, one alongside Hutchins. What about Cynthia Lattimore? Is she in the clear? She's clean. Unhappy marriage, no alibi, but no involvement in the crimes. She inherits what's left of Lattimore's estate after the lawsuits settle. Won't be much, but she'll survive. Kramer paused. Tell Wolfe I said good work. Again, I hate saying that, but it's true. Without his insight, we'd still be chasing Ellen Draycott while Hutchins disappeared to South America. I'll tell him. 10 o'clock, Goodwin. Don't make me wait. He hung up. I finished breakfast and went to the office to prepare for Kramer's visit. Wolfe wouldn't descend from the plant rooms until 11, but I could organize the evidence, prepare notes and make sure we had everything documented properly. The case was closed, but the paperwork never ended. At 9:30, the front doorbell rang. Fritz answered and came to the office looking puzzled. Archie, there is a visitor. A Mrs. Lattimore. She says she needs to speak with Mr. Wolfe urgently. Cynthia Lattimore. I hadn't expected her. Show her to the front room. I'll be there in a minute. I found her standing by the window, looking out at the street. She'd dressed simply today. Black slacks, a grey sweater, minimal jewelry. Without the designer armor and carefully applied makeup, she looked younger and more genuine. Also more tired, like she hadn't slept well since her husband's death. Mrs. Lattimore, I wasn't expecting to see you this morning. She turned. I know. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but I heard about Gerald Hutchins's arrest, and I needed to thank Mr. Wolfe, and you, for finding Bernard's killer. The police would have gotten there eventually. Maybe, but maybe not. Hutchins was careful. If you hadn't figured out his scheme, he might have gotten away with it. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I also wanted to apologize for the lawyer, the threats of lawsuits, the accusations. I was wrong. Mr. Wolfe wasn't responsible for Bernard's death. I know that now. He knows you were grieving. Grief makes people do strange things. That's generous, but it doesn't excuse my behavior. She took a breath. Can I ask you something, Mr. Goodwin? Did Bernard suffer? When he died, I mean, did he suffer? I thought about how to answer that. The truth was brutal. 2 bullets to the chest, probably conscious for at least a few seconds, dying alone in a warehouse while his killer stood over him. But sometimes the truth wasn't what people needed to hear. The medical examiner said it was quick. I said finally, he wouldn't have suffered long. She nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you. That helps, somehow, knowing he didn't suffer. Mrs. Lattimore, can I ask you something? Your marriage to Bernard, you said it wasn't happy, but did you care about him at all? She was quiet for a moment. I cared about who he was supposed to be. The successful investor, the brilliant financial mind, the man who seemed to have everything figured out. But the real Bernard, the man who worked 18-hour days because he was terrified of failure, the man who couldn't trust anyone, not even his own partner, the man who married me because I looked good at charity galas. She shook her head. I didn't know that man well enough to love him, but I didn't want him dead, and I'm glad you found out who killed him. What will you do now? Start over, sell the apartment, pay off Bernard's debts, and figure out who I am without the Lattimore name. Maybe go back to school, maybe travel, maybe just exist for a while without pretending to be someone I'm not. She stood up. Can you tell Mr. Wolfe I stopped by, and thank him for me? I will. And Mrs. Lattimore, good luck. Starting over isn't easy, but it's worth it. I hope you're right, Mr. Goodwin. I really do. She left, and I watched through the window as she walked down the street, shoulders back, head high. Whatever else she was, Cynthia Lattimore wasn't a quitter. At 10 o'clock sharp, Kramer arrived with Sergeant Stebbins and a stenographer. Wolfe was still in the plant rooms, which annoyed Kramer to no end. Does he do this deliberately? Kramer demanded, pacing in the office like a caged bear. Make people wait while he plays with his orchids? It's not playing, I said mildly. It's serious horticulture, and yes, he does it deliberately. Routine is sacred to Mr. Wolfe. Routine. Right. Must be nice to have routines when people are getting murdered. To be fair, Mr. Wolfe solved the murders. You're here to get credit for them. Kramer glared at me, but before he could respond, the elevator descended with its characteristic whir. Wolfe emerged, moving with his usual deliberate precision, and settled into his desk chair with a satisfied grunt. Inspector, Sergeant, I understand you've arrested Gerald Hutchins. Thanks to your deduction, Kramer said grudgingly, which I'm here to document officially. Walk me through it. How did you figure out Hutchins was the killer? Wolfe poured beer, took a sip, and set the glass down precisely on its coaster. It began with the evidence. Miss Draycott's embezzlement was sophisticated, carefully planned over 20 months, yet the evidence pointing to her as the embezzler was extraordinarily comprehensive. Digital logs, transaction records, forensic analyses. Too comprehensive, in fact. Criminals don't document their own crimes so thoroughly. Unless they're stupid, Stebbins offered. Miss Draycott is many things, but stupid is not one of them. Which suggested someone else had compiled the evidence, someone with investigative expertise and access to Lattimore Capital systems. When Archie informed me that Bernard Lattimore had hired a forensic accountant, I realized that accountant would have precisely that access. But lots of accountants investigate fraud, Kramer said. Why suspect Hutchins specifically? Several inconsistencies. First, Mr. Hutchins was remarkably cooperative when Archie visited him. He provided comprehensive evidence without hesitation, without concern for confidentiality or legal exposure. Legitimate investigators are cautious about sharing information. Hutchins had no such caution because he wanted us focused on Ellen Draycott as the primary suspect. What else? Second, his timeline was fabricated. He claimed he was scheduled to meet with Lattimore on Thursday morning to deliver his findings. But if that were true, Lattimore would have been more optimistic when he visited this brownstone on Wednesday afternoon. He would have mentioned that proof of his innocence was imminent. He did not, because no such meeting was scheduled. Hutchins invented it to explain his possession of detailed evidence. Kramer pulled out his notebook and started writing. Go on. Third, and most revealing, Hutchins knew about the Red Hook warehouse. When he spoke with Archie, he mentioned that the warehouse was leased using Ellen Draycott's shell company. But the warehouse wasn't public information. The police hadn't released details about the murder scene. The only way Hutchins could know about it was if he had been there himself, which he had, because he used it to kill Bernard Lattimore. The blood stains we found at the warehouse match Lattimore's blood type, Stebbins confirmed. We're running DNA, but it's definitely his blood. Hutchins shot him there, then dumped the body in the East River from the Williamsburg Bridge. The whole thing took maybe 30 minutes. Why kill Philip Renshaw? I asked. He was Ellen's accomplice, sure, but why murder him? Renshaw had the passwords to the offshore accounts, Wolfe explained. Hutchins needed those passwords to steal the embezzled money. When Renshaw refused to cooperate, Hutchins killed him, searched his apartment for the passwords, and then burned the apartment to destroy evidence. He also took Renshaw's identity temporarily, using it to blackmail Ellen Draycott and extort money from Josephine Kern. The $200,000 Ellen paid. Where's that money now? Kramer asked. Hutchins deposited it in a separate account under a false name. We found the account information in his office, Stebbins said, along with plane tickets to Brazil, a fake passport, and detailed plans for disappearing. He was planning to flee this weekend. He would have succeeded, Wolfe said quietly, if he hadn't been greedy. Attempting to extort money from Miss Kern was unnecessary. He already had access to the $17 million in the Cayman accounts. But greed is insatiable. He wanted more, and that greed led him to make mistakes. Like trying to kill Goodwin in Central Park, Kramer said dryly. That was a mistake. Indeed, Mr. Hutchins underestimated our preparation and overestimated his own cleverness. Fatal errors, both of them. The stenographer's fingers flew over the keys, recording everything. Kramer asked a dozen more questions, details about timing, evidence, witness statements. Wolfe answered each one with precision, occasionally consulting the notes I'd prepared. By the time we finished, it was nearly noon. Kramer stood up, stretching. All right, I've got what I need. The DA will probably want to talk to you before trial, but that won't be for months. Hutchins's lawyer is going to fight this every step of the way. Let him fight, Wolfe said. The evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Hutchins will spend the rest of his life in prison, as he deserves. Agreed. Kramer started to leave, then paused at the door. Wolfe, I hate saying this, but we needed you on this one. Without your insight, Hutchins would have framed Ellen Draycott completely and disappeared with the money. So, thanks. Wolfe inclined his head slightly. You're welcome, Inspector. Now please leave. You're interfering with my lunch. Kramer actually smiled, a rare sight. Then he, Stebbins, and the stenographer departed, taking their paperwork and their official gratitude with them. When they were gone, Wolfe looked at me. Is Fritz ready with lunch? He's been ready for 30 minutes. You made him wait. Good. Anticipation improves appetite. He stood up with effort. Come, Archie. Let us eat. This case has consumed 4 days of our lives, and I'm eager to return to normalcy. Normalcy, meaning beer and orchids. Among other things. Perhaps a good book. Perhaps some music. Perhaps simply sitting in this office without worrying about embezzlement and murder. We went to the dining room, where Fritz had prepared something magnificent. Roasted duck with orange glaze, wild rice, vegetables that tasted like they'd been picked that morning. As we ate, I thought about the case and its resolution. Bernard Lattimore had come to us seeking help, and we'd turned him away. Hours later, he was dead. That failure had haunted Wolfe for days, driving him to solve the case with unusual intensity. Now, with the killer caught and the truth revealed, perhaps that ghost could finally rest. After lunch, Wolfe returned to his office and his book. I went upstairs to my room, thinking I'd catch up on correspondence, or maybe take a nap. But when I reached the second floor, I heard voices from the guest room, Ellen Draycott and Josephine Kern, talking quietly. I knocked on the door frame. Both women looked up. Mr. Goodwin, Josephine said. We were just talking about what happens next. The police said we're free to go. You are. Hutchins is in custody, and you're both safe. The case is closed. Ellen stood up. She looked different than she had yesterday, less desperate, more resigned. I'm leaving for the district attorney's office this afternoon. My lawyer says I'll probably plead guilty to embezzlement and serve 8 to 12 years. It could be worse. It could be, I agreed. You could be sitting next to Hutchins in a cell, facing murder charges. I know. I made terrible choices, Mr. Goodwin. I let greed cloud my judgment, and I helped destroy the company Bernard and I built together. I'll pay for that. But at least I'm not a murderer. At least I have that. Do you regret it? The embezzlement, I mean. She thought about it. I regret getting caught. I regret the damage it caused. But do I regret trying to grow the fund? To take risks? To push for bigger returns? No. Bernard was too conservative, too cautious. We were losing clients because we couldn't compete with more aggressive funds. I did what I thought was necessary. By stealing. By borrowing, she corrected. I was going to put it all back once my investments paid off. That was always the plan. Until Hutchins came along and decided to steal your theft. Yes. Until Hutchins. She picked up her coat. Thank you for everything, Mr. Goodwin. Thank you for believing I wasn't a murderer, even when the evidence said otherwise. And thank Mr. Wolfe for me. He saved my life, whether he intended to or not. She left. Josephine Kern remained, looking out the window at the street below. What about you? I asked. What happens next? I don't know. The fund is probably finished. The scandal, the lawsuits, the clients redeeming their money. Even if we survive, I'm not sure I want to stay. Too many bad memories. You could start over somewhere else. You're smart, you're honest, and you tried to do the right thing when it mattered. That counts for something. Maybe. She turned to face me. Mr. Goodwin, can I ask you something? When you figured out Hutchins was the killer, did you suspect me? Even for a moment? Everyone was a suspect at some point. But no, I never seriously thought you killed Lattimore. You didn't have the motive or the personality for it. What is the personality for murder? Cold, calculating, willing to destroy lives for personal gain. That's Hutchins. That's not you. She smiled slightly. Thank you for that. It helps, somehow, knowing you didn't think I was capable of it. She left soon after, taking a cab back to her apartment. I watched from the window as the cab pulled away, then went back downstairs to the office. Wolfe was still reading, a glass of beer at his elbow, his expression peaceful. The case was closed, justice had been served, order had been restored. All the witnesses gone? He asked without looking up. All gone. Ellen's heading to the DA. Josephine's going home. And Cynthia Lattimore stopped by earlier to thank you. Satisfactory. He turned a page. Archie, I've been thinking about this case, about Bernard Lattimore's visit here on Wednesday, and my decision to decline his case. You couldn't have known he'd be killed. No. But I should have helped him regardless. He came here frightened and desperate, seeking protection from a threat he believed was real. That threat was real, as it turned out. And because I dismissed him due to boredom and prejudice, he died alone in a warehouse, shot twice by a man he trusted. That weighs on me. You solved his murder. You caught his killer. That counts for something. It counts for nothing if the man is still dead. We don't bring people back to life, Archie. We only provide explanations for their deaths. It's cold comfort at best. I sat down. So what are you saying? That you'll take every case that walks through that door, regardless of how boring it is? No. I'm saying I'll consider each case more carefully. I'll remember that behind every client is a human being with fears and needs and vulnerabilities, and I'll try not to let my comfort interfere with my duty. That's very philosophical of you. Don't mock me, Archie. I'm trying to be serious. I know you are. And for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing in the end. We caught the killer. We protected the innocent. We restored some measure of justice. Bernard Lattimore would probably consider that a successful outcome. Wolfe was quiet for a moment. Then, perhaps. But I'll still remember his face when he left this brownstone. The fear in his eyes, the hope that I would help him, and the disappointment when I refused. I'll remember that for a long time. Good, I said. Memory keeps us honest, keeps us human, and keeps us from making the same mistakes twice. Indeed. He returned to his book, but I noticed he didn't turn any pages for several minutes. Outside, the November wind picked up, rattling the brownstone's windows and sending more leaves skittering down the street. Caesar barked once from the front hall, probably at a squirrel or a passing dog. Normal sounds, normal life. The case of the dead investor was closed. The killer was caught. The embezzlement was exposed. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. And in his office, surrounded by books and orchids and beer, Nero Wolfe settled back into his routine. Older perhaps, wiser certainly, and just a little bit more aware of the weight of the choices we make. Sometimes that awareness is all we can hope for. The rest of Saturday passed in what Wolfe called blessed tranquility, which meant nobody got murdered, nobody showed up demanding help, and the telephone only rang twice, once with a wrong number, once with Mrs. Bruner calling about her missing Pomeranian. I told her we'd found it 3 days ago, that it had been living under her neighbor's porch the whole time, and that our fee was $50. She thanked me profusely and promised to send a check, which she probably wouldn't, but that was par for the course. Sunday arrived with unseasonable warmth, one of those November days that New York occasionally gifts you before winter locks in for real. I spent the morning walking the dogs through the neighborhood, Caesar leading the pack with his usual military precision, the others following in formation. People on the street gave us wide berth, which suited me fine. 5 Dobermans had that effect. When I returned, Fritz was in the kitchen preparing Sunday dinner, roast beef with Yorkshire pudding, one of Wolfe's favorites. The smell alone was enough to make you weep with joy. I poured myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table while Fritz worked. "It is good to have peace again," Fritz observed, basting the roast. "These past days have been turbulent. Mr. Wolfe does not like turbulence. Nobody does. But murder has a way of creating it. That poor man, Mr. Lattimore, he seemed so frightened when he was here, so desperate for help, and we turned him away. We didn't know what would happen, Fritz. None of us did. Perhaps. But I wonder if Mr. Wolfe will ever forgive himself for that decision. He has been very quiet since Friday. Very thoughtful. That is not like him. He's processing. Give him time. He'll bounce back. I hope you are right, Archie. I do not like to see him troubled." We let the subject drop. After breakfast, I went to the office to catch up on correspondence and filing. The case documents needed to be organized, witness statements needed to be indexed, and the final bill needed to be prepared. Not that we'd had a client exactly, but Ellen Draycott had expressed willingness to pay for our help in proving her innocence of murder. I figured $15,000 was fair enough to cover our time and expenses, not so much that it would bankrupt her before she went to prison. At 11 o'clock, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms. He looked rested, almost content. The dark mood from yesterday had lifted, or at least been set aside. He settled into his chair, rang for beer, and opened the Sunday Times crossword. "Any calls?" he asked, pen poised over the puzzle. "Mrs. Bruner about her Pomeranian. I told her we found it. She's sending a check." "She won't." "I know, but hope springs eternal. Hope is for fools. I prefer certainty." He filled in 3 answers in rapid succession, then looked up. Have you prepared the final report on the Lattimore case? Still working on it. I figured you'd want to review it before we send copies to Kramer and the DA. Correct. I want to ensure accuracy. This case will be studied, dissected, analyzed by prosecutors and defense attorneys. Our report needs to be impeccable. It will be. Though I'm guessing Hutchins's lawyer will try to discredit our involvement, claim we contaminated evidence or coerced confessions or some such nonsense. Let them try. Our methods were sound, our reasoning was solid, and our conclusions were correct. Thomas Eldridge is an excellent attorney, but even he cannot defend the indefensible. We worked in companionable silence for a while, Wolfe with his crossword, me with the case files. Outside, the November sun streamed through the windows, warming the office. Caesar dozed in the hallway, occasionally twitching in his sleep, probably dreaming of squirrels or intruders. Normal Sunday sounds, normal Sunday life. At 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Fritz answered and returned looking puzzled. Archie, there is a delivery. A package for Mr. Wolfe, from Mrs. Lattimore. Cynthia Lattimore. What's she sending? I do not know, but it is very large. I went to the front hall. 2 delivery men were standing there with a massive wooden crate, the kind used for shipping artwork or expensive furniture. They'd set it down in the entry, and Caesar was circling it suspiciously, trying to determine if it posed a threat to the household. Sign here, one of the delivery men said, handing me a clipboard. I signed and tipped them both. When they left, I called Wolfe to the front hall. He emerged from the office looking annoyed at the interruption, but his expression changed when he saw the crate. What is this? Apparently a gift from Cynthia Lattimore. Should I open it? Please. I found a crowbar in the basement and pried open the crate. Inside, wrapped in protective padding, was a painting. A large, beautiful, obviously expensive painting. I lifted it out carefully and propped it against the wall. It was an oil painting, maybe 4 feet by 3 feet, depicting a lush garden scene with vibrant flowers, winding paths, and a fountain in the background. The style was impressionist, the execution masterful. In the lower right corner was a signature I recognized from museum visits, Claude Monet. Good God, I said, is this real? Wolfe moved closer, studying the painting with the intensity he usually reserved for orchids. It appears to be. The brushwork is consistent with Monet's late period. The subject matter is typical of his Giverny gardens, and the signature appears authentic, though I would need an expert to confirm it. Why would Cynthia Lattimore send you a Monet? Let's find out. Wolfe reached into the crate and pulled out an envelope that had been tucked inside. He opened it and read aloud. Dear Mr. Wolfe, thank you for finding my husband's killer and restoring some measure of justice to his death. I know Bernard would have been grateful, even though circumstances prevented him from thanking you himself. This painting belonged to Bernard's family for 3 generations. It hung in his father's study, then in Bernard's office, and now it has no home. I'm selling most of Bernard's art collection to pay his debts and settle the lawsuits from the embezzlement scandal. But this piece felt different. It felt like it should go to someone who would appreciate it properly. When I visited your brownstone yesterday, I noticed you have orchids visible through your office window. I imagine someone who cultivates orchids with such devotion would also appreciate Monet's garden paintings. Consider this a gift, with my gratitude and my apologies for the accusations I made in anger. I hope the painting brings you as much joy as your orchids do. Sincerely, Cynthia Lattimore. Wolfe was silent for a long moment, staring at the painting. Then he said quietly, Extraordinary. The woman has excellent taste and unexpected generosity. It's worth a fortune, I said. Probably more than Bernard Lattimore owed in debts. Why not sell it? Because she values gesture over money. Because she recognizes that some things cannot be measured in dollars. Because she understands that gratitude requires more than words. He looked at me. Archie, hang this painting in the dining room opposite the window. I want to see it when I eat. It will remind me that even in cases involving greed and murder, there can be moments of grace. You're getting philosophical again. I'm getting old. Philosophy is what old men do when they run out of beer. I grinned. You're not out of beer. Fritz restocked the refrigerator yesterday. Then I have time before philosophy becomes mandatory. Come, let us have lunch. Fritz has prepared something magnificent, and I refuse to let it get cold while we stand here admiring paintings. We ate in the dining room, the Monet propped against the wall where Wolfe could see it. The roast beef was perfection, pink in the center, crispy on the outside, served with Yorkshire pudding that rose like clouds, and beef stews that tasted like concentrated bovine happiness. Fritz had also prepared roasted vegetables, creamed spinach, and a salad with a vinaigrette that could make you reconsider your life choices. Over lunch, Wolfe said, "Archie, I've been reflecting on this case, on the nature of greed and its consequences." Heavy topic for Sunday lunch. Perhaps, but relevant nonetheless. Consider, Ellen Draycott embezzled $17 million because she wanted to grow the fund, to take bigger risks, to compete more aggressively. Her greed was professional, almost impersonal. She convinced herself she was borrowing, not stealing. And Philip Renshaw's greed was reactive. He felt undervalued, underappreciated, underpaid. When Ellen offered him a partnership in theft, he took it because he felt he deserved more than he was getting. His greed was emotional, driven by resentment. What about Hutchins? Hutchins is the most interesting case. His greed was opportunistic and intellectual. He saw a scheme in progress, recognized its vulnerabilities, and decided to exploit them for personal gain. He didn't initiate the embezzlement, he merely hijacked it, and when complications arose, he eliminated them with clinical efficiency. His greed was cold, calculating, and ultimately more dangerous than the others because it was entirely rational. So, which is worse, emotional greed or rational greed? Both are destructive, but rational greed is more insidious because it operates without the constraints of conscience or emotion. Hutchins killed 2 people with less remorse than most people feel about killing insects. That kind of dissociation from human feeling is terrifying. And yet, I pointed out, Cynthia Lattimore sent you a Monet worth hundreds of thousands of dollars out of gratitude. So not everyone in this case was motivated by greed. True, Mrs. Lattimore is a complication. She married for financial security, which is a form of mercenary behavior. Yet when the money evaporated, she didn't cling to what remained. She gave away a valuable painting because gesture mattered more than profit. Perhaps there's hope for humanity after all. You doubted it. I frequently doubt it, but occasionally someone surprises me. After lunch we returned to the office. I spent the afternoon finishing the case report while Wolfe read and drank beer. At 4 o'clock, he went back to the plant rooms for his afternoon session with the orchids, leaving me to handle any interruptions. There were none. The telephone stayed silent. The doorbell didn't ring. The world, it seemed, had decided to leave Nero Wolfe alone for a few hours. At 6 o'clock, Wolfe came down and we had dinner. Fritz's Sunday dinners always had multiple courses, and tonight was no exception. Soup, salad, the leftover roast beef, transformed into sandwiches with horseradish sauce, cheese and fruit, coffee and cognac. We ate slowly, savoring each course, talking about nothing in particular. After dinner, Wolfe settled in the office with a book, something in German about mushroom cultivation, and I sat at my desk pretending to work while actually just enjoying the peace. The case was over. The killer was caught. The innocent were protected. Justice in its messy and imperfect way had been served. At 8 o'clock, the telephone rang. I picked it up, expecting another wrong number, or maybe Mrs. Brunner calling to say her check was in the mail. Instead, I heard Inspector Kramer's voice, tired but satisfied. "Goodwin, tell Wolfe that Hutchins signed a full confession this afternoon. Eldridge advised against it, but Hutchins insisted, said he wanted credit for his work, wanted people to know how clever he'd been. Narcissist to the end." What did he confess to? Everything. Both murders, the embezzlement conspiracy, the blackmail, the arson. He even confessed to sending those death threat letters to Lattimore, said it was his idea of psychological warfare, softening up the target before the kill. The DA's thrilled. This case is going to close faster than any murder I've ever worked. That's good news, Inspector. Yeah, and Goodwin, tell Wolfe, I said thanks again. I know he doesn't care about gratitude, but I'm saying it anyway. This one would have haunted me if we'd gotten it wrong. I'll tell him. Kramer hung up. I relayed the information to Wolfe, who grunted in acknowledgement, but didn't look up from his book. Hutchins confessed. I said, full confession, every detail, the case is officially closed. Satisfactory. That's all you have to say? Satisfactory? What else is there to say? The guilty are punished. The innocent are freed, and justice is served. That's the best outcome we could hope for. Anything beyond that is decoration. Some people might want to celebrate, pop champagne, pat themselves on the back. I am not some people. I am Nero Wolfe, and I do not celebrate the obvious conclusion of a case that should never have become complicated in the first place. If Bernard Lattimore had trusted the police instead of hiring a corrupt forensic accountant, he might still be alive. If Ellen Draycott had been honest instead of embezzling, none of this would have happened. The case is closed because people made bad choices, and those choices caught up with them. There's nothing to celebrate in that. You're in a mood. I'm in reality, which is frequently indistinguishable from a mood. I let it go. Wolfe was processing in his own way, dealing with the case's aftermath on his own terms. He'd be back to normal by morning, grumpy, difficult, brilliant and impossible, the way he was supposed to be. At 10 o'clock I said goodnight and went upstairs. My room was exactly as I'd left it. Bed made, clothes organized, everything in its place, normal life restored. I got ready for bed, but before turning off the light, I looked out my window at the street below. The brownstone was quiet. The dogs were on patrol. I could see Caesar's shadow moving past the front windows, Mars covering the side entrance, the others checking their assigned zones. The fortress was secure. The household was safe. Order was maintained. And somewhere in the city, Gerald Hutchins was sitting in a cell, probably still convinced he'd been clever, still unable to understand that cleverness without conscience is just another form of madness. I turned off the light and got into bed. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new problems, new people walking through that front door with their fears and their secrets and their desperate need for help. Some we'd help, some we'd turn away. But we'd do it thoughtfully, carefully, remembering that behind every case was a human being. That was the lesson of Bernard Lattimore's death, I suppose. Not that we should take every case, we couldn't and shouldn't, but that we should treat every potential client with respect, every request with consideration, and every decision with care. Because sometimes, the case we turn away becomes the case that haunts us forever. I fell asleep thinking about that, and dreaming of nothing at all. Monday morning, November 4th, I woke to the sound of Caesar barking downstairs, not his alert bark or his warning bark, his annoyed bark, the one he reserved for deliveries and door-to-door salesmen. I checked the clock, 7:30, too early for visitors. I threw on clothes and went downstairs. Fritz was at the front door, signing for a registered letter. When he handed it to me, I saw it was from the district attorney's office, addressed to Nero Wolfe. I took it to the office and set it on Wolfe's desk, right where he'd see it when he came down at 11. Then I made coffee, fed the dogs and settled in to read the morning paper. The Lattimore case had made the front page, prominent investor murdered by trusted accountant. The article detailed Hutchins's confession, Ellen Draycott's embezzlement, and Wolfe's role in solving the case. There was even a quote from Kramer. Without the assistance of private investigator Nero Wolfe, this case might have resulted in a miscarriage of justice. I cut out the article and filed it with our case records. Wolfe wouldn't care about the publicity, but I liked keeping track of his successes. Someday, maybe I'd write a book about them. The Cases of Nero Wolfe, or something like that. It would be a bestseller. Well, maybe not a bestseller, but at least people would know what we did here in this brownstone. At 11 o'clock, Wolfe descended. He saw the registered letter immediately and opened it with his bronze opener. "The district attorney wishes to commend us for our assistance," he said after reading. "He's also enclosing a check for $5,000 as a consultation fee, and Ellen Draycott has authorized payment of $15,000 for proving her innocence of murder, $20,000 total, satisfactory." More than satisfactory. That's real money. It is indeed. Archie, deposit the checks and allocate the funds appropriately. 15% to Saul for his surveillance work, 5% to Fritz for hazard pay. He dealt with too many disruptions last week. The remainder goes to operating expenses and my discretionary account. Your discretionary account being orchids. Among other things, Theodore has been requesting funds for new dendrobium hybrids. This windfall makes that possible. So crime does pay, at least for us. Crime pays for no one, Archie, but justice occasionally compensates those who serve it. There's a difference. The telephone rang. I answered. Nero Wolfe's office. "Mr. Goodwin," female voice, nervous. My name is Patricia Hammond. I've been referred to Mr. Wolfe by Inspector Kramer. I have a problem that I think requires his expertise. What kind of problem? It's complicated. It involves my late husband's business partner, a missing will, and what might be fraud or might be murder. Can Mr. Wolfe see me? I looked at Wolfe. He was listening, his expression neutral. Hold please, Mrs. Hammond. I covered the receiver. Woman with a missing will, possible fraud or murder. Kramer referred her. Should I schedule an appointment? Wolfe was silent for a long moment. I could see him thinking, weighing, considering. Then he nodded slowly. Tell her to come tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And Archie, take detailed notes during the consultation. If her case proves tedious or impossible, I want documentation of why we declined it. And if it's interesting, then we'll proceed. Carefully, thoughtfully, and with proper respect for the human being who's asking for help. I uncovered the receiver. Mrs. Hammond, Mr. Wolfe will see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Bring any relevant documents and be prepared to tell your story completely. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Thank you so much. She hung up. I put down the receiver and looked at Wolfe. A new case already, we just closed the last one. Crime doesn't wait for our convenience, Wolfe said, reaching for his beer. It simply happens, relentlessly and inevitably. Our job is to bring order to that chaos, one case at a time. Poetic. Pragmatic. Now let me finish my beer in peace. Tomorrow will bring its own complications. Today, I simply want to read, drink, and think about orchids. Fair enough. I went back to my desk and started organizing the week's correspondence. Outside, November continued its march toward winter. The trees were nearly bare, the air was cold, and the days were growing shorter. But inside the brownstone, life went on. Wolfe with his orchids and his beer, Fritz with his cooking, the dogs with their patrols, and me with my notebook, my typewriter, and my front row seat to the cases of Nero Wolfe. It was a good life, complicated sometimes, dangerous occasionally, but good. And tomorrow, when Patricia Hammond walked through that door with her missing will and her possible murder, we'd be ready. Because that's what we did. That's who we were. Nero Wolfe, private detective. 1/7 of a ton of genius, stubbornness and peculiar brilliance. And Archie Goodwin, his assistant, chronicler, and occasionally the guy who kept him from retreating into his orchids forever. Together, we solved impossible cases, caught clever killers, and brought order to chaos. It wasn't much, in the grand scheme of things, but it was enough.